Welcome everybody to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, July 21st, 2009. We'll start off this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you join us, led by Supervisor Montgomery.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jennifer. Ann, would you please read the meeting procedures for us?
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, July 21st, 2009. Agendas are available on the chair in the back of this meeting room. If you are here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there is a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has the discretion of limiting the total discussion time on any item. If you are hearing impaired, we have listening devices available. It is requested that all cell phones and pagers be either turned off or put in the silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thank you. We'll move on to public comment now. And Holly Heinzen is going to give us an update. We got some, I call it very bad news from the state legislature striking a deal last night. So Holly's going to update us.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Rock Coleman, members of the board. As you know, the state legislature late last night reached a tentative deal on the state budget, and it is not unanticipated the consequences of that, but certainly it has had the impacts that we've been discussing over the last couple of months. These include large impacts to the road, our county road transportation system, impacts to HHS, as well as impacts to public safety. As you may have read, there are a couple of trailer bills that will be coming back from the state over the next couple days that will include the revenue packages. And this morning you see our own lobbyist as well as various associations trying to understand the interplay between the Prop 1A, which is $10 to $11 million for us, the redevelopment hits, as well as how the highway users' gas tax will be apportioned to counties or not be apportioned to counties. So what we anticipate in Placer County, we believe will be very similar to what we discussed several weeks ago. And I'm just going to give you a recap of what we know, understanding that that could change. As I mentioned, the Prop 1A would be a loan. It would take a share of our property tax as well as those of the special districts. For Placer County, that will be between $10 and $11 million, depending on how that legislation comes down and what that trigger applies to. Public safety is probably the most unclear right now, but overall, including some declines in local revenue, we'll be looking at $3 million to $3.5 million plus or minus hits to public safety. HHS, $5.3 million more or less. That includes Healthy Families, CalWorks, Medi-Cal, and a number of other health and human services programs. Roads will be our big hit. We're very concerned about that. As we mentioned to you, the highway users' gas tax will be impacted rather significantly. We're anticipating about $6 to $8 million. It will be about over half of our road fund if it comes down the way they had originally discussed. And again, they are sorting out the legislation, and there is some verbiage in the discussion that suggests there may be some takeaway and give-backs. Not entirely clear. In either case, however, when the highway users' gas tax, and you've seen it identified as the HUTA funds, with those going away, that has clear implications for our road maintenance budget. So I think in sum total, Those are our largest impacts. We would expect over the next few days for the more details to come out, and how the legislature sorts it out will be very important to us. Nonetheless, we have been developing contingency plans knowing that some of these impacts would come down the way that they would. They're not positive for the county, but it does give us a path to proceed, and we'll be coming to your board on August 4th to provide some additional information and receive direction from your board in terms of priorities and how you may want to address those impacts. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can. Again, it is a little early, but if anybody has some questions, I can either address them now or I will come back to you and address them.
We have questions over here.
Holly, it sounds like, did you just portray what you expect to be like the worst case, or do you think it actually could get worse than what you just portrayed?
It could get worse. You know, again, the big issue for us will be the gas tax. The road fund will be very hard for us to address. We expect about a $20 million hit, sum total to us, and that would be about 15 plus or minus from the state, another $5 million in other local revenues that will be impacted. Anybody else?
If I was adding those up properly as you went, that was $26 to $30 million in total.
You know, I referenced several of the HHS revenues in sum total and in some components, so that could be
So what are we looking at right now? What's your guess for the total reduction in revenue?
I'm looking at about 5 to 5.5 million in state impacts, which would include the Prop 1A.
Right.
And we're looking at another 5 potentially in other revenue reductions that would include local sales tax, public safety sales tax, and an additional slight decline in property tax, but we're pretty much where we had anticipated with that.
So then $10 million is the revenue gap that we're going to be facing? Is that what I'm just hearing right there?
No. 15 to 20 million, I think, is
Oh, I'm sorry.
the range.
Okay.
20
I
million
heard 5
sum
and then 5.
total,
Okay.
15 to 15.5 from the state.
Okay. From what I heard this morning, I thought that they were looking at $16 billion in spending reductions and another $10 billion largely from holdbacks from local governments. And percentage share-wise, California's or Placer County is about, what, 1% of the state's population?
That
We're about
sounds about right, but I would have to check to be sure.
360,000 of 300 or of 36 million. So I'm just wondering, proportionally, then, would we be expecting something more along the lines of a 1% revenue reduction? Sounds like we're looking at double that almost.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be unlike what we've experienced in the past. Frankly, the Southern California tends to fare a little better in some of these budget reductions, and the Northern California counties and less urban counties tend to receive disproportionate share of the impacts on a percentage basis. So if that follows, that would make sense. I will say we have already provided direction to the departments to make reductions within their budget, even starting this for the upcoming fiscal year. HHS has made significant progress in identifying how they will address some of these reductions. In the past 5 years, we've backfilled HHS. We really would not be able to continue that. We wouldn't anticipate being able to do that. In fact, we'll have to be making material reductions in all of those areas.
Holly, if I recall, when we adopted our interim budget, it was $769 million, so we're looking at around $750 million. That's down 15% from last year, roughly?
It's about 11, I think.
It was 11
12.
before
Yeah,
the 20 million.
yeah.
Okay. You had mentioned redevelopment was going to take a hit. Which bucket was that in? I'm assuming it's not a separate number on top of the 1A, the roads.
It was not included in the 1A number of 10 to 11 million. That would be an additional amount as to how it was applied to the redevelopment budget. And I can get that number for you, or maybe 1 to 2 million.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A clarification on the road fund, because a number of individuals aren't familiar with that. A road maintenance fund is about $15 million countywide. $2.5 million of that is purely for snow removal last year. The kind of cuts that we're looking at will probably total about an $8 million reduction once you take in the offset of some other propositions. So that is huge when you talk about all your road maintenance funds being literally cut to that quick, from over $15 million down to $7 million left. So it's going to drastically affect all of our operations.
Yes, it will. And you know, I've been speaking primarily about our general fund and public safety. We would anticipate special districts to a much smaller degree to be impacted, as well as some of our transportation budgets, including TART, PCT, et cetera.
Numbers
Oh,
firm up.
absolutely. Yes, we'll be sorting them out as we go through the next few days, definitely.
Not really a county-specific issue, but in terms of special districts. I know originally the governor had talked about trying to protect fire protection. Is that still in there, do we know, or are they going to take it?
I don't know,
Okay.
but I will find out, and certainly the extent to which certain districts don't have 1A applied, those that do have 1A applied, other entities and jurisdictions then have a greater share, or they take off of a greater base.
Yeah, I'm concerned because, as you know, we had a fire in Placer County in the west end of the district, and that was if I recall, a special district that responded to that. Is that correct, Mike?
Sir Montgomery of local government, and CAL FIRE and Dry Creek Fire and Sacramento County Fire as well.
Okay, thank you.
As to your question about the fire districts, if I might, Mr. Chairman, I ran into Chief Whitelaw, I don't know if he's in the room, a minute ago, and we were discussing that very topic as to whether fire districts might be exempt from this round of property tax shift. And for those of you who remember the early ERAF shifts in the 90s, fire districts were in fact exempt from the first round, but not from subsequent rounds. And so it is a very large worry on the fire side of the public safety sector, and up here in particular, because there is only state, federal resources as well as local government resources. So it's a worrisome scenario for the fire districts.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Chairman Rockholm, members of the board, Chief Executive Officer, my name is Alex Morolatos. I am here representing the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. I hold the small lodging seat, and I am currently the board chair. As chair, I've been leading the negotiations with the CEO's office. Members of the executive committee and the board are present with me today. I'm here because we are at an impasse with the CEO's office regarding our FY09-10 TOT budget and contract, which means that the NLTRA is technically operating without a funding contract in place. This is not because the NLTRA lacks recognition of the economic crisis the county is dealing with, nor is it about the dollar amount of the contract. We have done everything we have been asked to do from a fiscal perspective, with willingness to contribute to the county's need to redirect some of its revenue, including TOT, equitably. Given what Holly just said, I can commit to you that this board is recognition of the fact that the current 3.6 is also at jeopardy, given the constraints that you're going to face. And we're willing to have that discussion and very interested in being part of that solution. Our board invested literally hundreds of volunteer hours over the last 18 months developing alternatives for the county and bringing forth what we believe to be fair and equitable deal structures, including 2 at the requested $3.6 million contract amount, all of which reflected the additional reduction of $500,000 to be applied elsewhere in eastern Placer County, as per board action on February 24th. This impasse reflects a low point in the relationship between the Resort Association and the CEO's office, and a lack of clarity and mutual agreement on the funding policies that serve as the foundation of our relationship. Our board has formally communicated our concerns to the County Chief Executive Officer, regarding the manner in which the Resort Association relationship is being managed. Over the last 18 months, the relationship has deteriorated to the point where there is no collaboration and a strong perception that the CEO's office is not negotiating in good faith. The CEO's representative has regularly applied aggressive contract negotiating techniques, dictating contract terms to our volunteer board, an organization against which we have had very little leverage or recourse. Over that time, we have seen our budget dramatically reduced, and we have been the focus of considerable scrutiny by county staff. While some of this scrutiny has certainly strengthened our organization, this board believes the degree has been punitive, excessive, and uncalled for. The lack of acceptance of submitted budgets has led to a large consumption of volunteer time to no end and consumed a considerable amount of goodwill. There has been no respect of the opinions of this board or its staff, nor respect of the principles upon which the NLTRA was formed. In fact, we are being managed much like a contract than a strategic partnership with the county. We hope to address these issues with the CEO's office quickly and bring a budget and contract forward to this board for approval by the end of August. The other reason for our current, I'm wrapping up, Rocky,
Okay.
if I could indulge for just one more minute. The other reason for our current impasse is the lack of agreement on the NLTRA funding policy. It is our belief that the policies which had served as the foundation of our relationship have been changed by the CEO's office without agreement from both the NLTRA and this board. I am submitting a memo that outlines our concerns, and I ask that you review it carefully. In order to overcome the current contract impasse, we would ask that you direct staff to place a discussion of the NLTRA funding policy on your agenda as soon as possible. This will allow us the opportunity to formally present our position and you the opportunity to either reaffirm or redefine the funding policy of the NLTRA and our community. We cannot afford to avoid this important policy discussion any longer. These may be difficult times, but our organization and community are committed to our partnership, our ability to achieve significant fiscal, and monetary results in the coming years, and we are confident in achieving our goal of protecting and enhancing North Lake Tahoe as a world-class tourism destination. Together, we can. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Jim Durfee with Facility Services. If I could have just a minute or two, I wanted to show you a very quick DVD about our Heritage Trail program through museums. It takes about a minute, and I've got flyers here. The program starts, it's August 8th and 9th. It's essentially a tour of museums from one end of the county to the other, including museums up here in Tahoe City and at Boreal Ridge. And the PIO's office and museum staff have collaborated on this DVD, so if you'll indulge us just for a minute, I think you'll find it very interesting.
For hands-on family fun, come travel Placer County's Heritage Trail on August 8th and 9th with 18 free museum stops from Lake Tahoe to Roseville. There will be lots of fun activities for you and your family to enjoy, like sack races, ice cream making, and gold panning. And admission to all museums is free. For a day of fun, come travel Placer County's Heritage Trail. That's Saturday and Sunday, August 8th and 9th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. each day. For more information, call us at 530-889-6500 or visit us online at theheritagetrail.blogspot.com. That's Placer County's Heritage Trail. It's fun, it's local, and it's free.
Probably next year. I'm going to leave flyers for all of you and for the public with the clerk, but I appreciate you taking the time to watch that. I think staff in the PIO's office did a great job on that. Actually, the video is also available on our website. You can just go to the county website. I think it's actually the first item on there right now. So thank you very much.
George Coster, president of the Squaw Valley Museum Foundation. I couldn't, resist the opportunity to go in right behind the museum tour. I want to do a special thanks to the Board of Supervisors as well as our partner, the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. We will be sending out, if you recall, part of our Phase 2 was a master plan, so we just got this. We'll be sending it out, a copy to each of you, and moving forward with the execution of our business plan for the Squaw Valley Museum. We've identified 6 different sites in Squaw Valley. We're looking forward to each community member coming up and saying they either hate or love the site, as well as starting to put together an interim museum here in the village for the upcoming winter season. So again, thanks for your support. Thanks for our great relationship with the Resort Association that's helped incubate us out. And I hope you all get a chance to do the museum heritage tourism, because obviously it's a great economic resource for us. Thanks.
Good morning, Chairman and Supervisors. This is Gary Davis. I'm a civil engineer in Tahoe City. I want to follow up with George's comment because we're one of the consultants with AMS Planning and Will Bruder on this potential Squaw Valley Olympic Museum. And we thank you. It's a fabulous opportunity, I think, for the county and the future of North Lake Tahoe and in this part of Placer County. It's a little bit more ambitious than you may have envisioned, but when you read this summary report, I think you'll be quite excited about it the way the rest of us are. What I'm really here to talk about today, this morning anyway, is I sit on the Placer County Tahoe City Design Review Committee. I've been on there for about 15 years. There's several members who have been on there longer than I have. And the whole time that I've been on there, we've always complained about enforcement. And the enforcement officer comes and goes, but he is not able apparently to do any enforcement unless there's a complaint. It's a complaint-driven system. Right now we have 13 sandwich boards out on the sidewalk which are against our ordinances. It's rather frustrating for us who donate our time to this committee to get people to do the right thing and then have blatant omissions of the ordinance go on right in front of an enforcement officer who's not able to respond to this. We would ask you as a committee that we change that policy somewhat, because most of this is education. A lot of people, particularly in these difficult times, don't know what the ordinances are. They don't know that a sandwich board is not per the ordinance. And all it takes is somebody to go into that shop and give the owner a little bit of education that that's against the law, and we'd probably get a lot better result from it. But it penalizes the people who do pay the fees, pay the consultants to come in to get their signs done correctly. They're kind of looking stupid when the guy right next door does whatever he wants and there's absolutely no enforcement. So I'd ask you to perhaps take a look at that enforcement, whether we just change the policy on the member we have for enforcement or we increase the enforcement. We in Tahoe City, with the Tahoe City Design Review Committee, would appreciate that. Thank you.
How many other folks want to comment under public comment by a show of hands? Is that the only one then? Okay, well, Finney, go ahead and come up, and because we're running a little behind, so.
Can you all hear me? Okay, great. I wonder if I can get the music to the trail presentation in the background. That might kind of make it go a little better, though. Good morning, members of the, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Josh Jindal. I'm president of the Placer County Deputy Sheriff's Association, and it is on behalf of them that I speak right now. It's my understanding, based on communications from Mr. Miller, that your board would be advised of Mr. Miller's opinion on whether or not to impose a labor contract upon the men and women of the Placer County Deputy Sheriff's Association. The DSA recognizes and understands the current economic difficulties faced by the public and private sectors. Our members live, work, and raise their families during these same economic times in the same communities that you govern. With genuine leadership from Sheriff Bonner and District Attorney Finocchio, the public safety budgets within respective departments were met and balanced for the 2009-2010 fiscal year. This includes salary and benefits for both DSA and non-DSA employees. This was done under almost unheard of and unreachable expectations. This was not an easy task, but was obtained through leadership, cooperation, transparency, and constructive problem solving among all involved within the two departments of public safety. Some of the imposed cost-saving measures directly affected our members, yet they persevered for the good of all involved. Contract negotiations have been intermittently occurring since the fall of 2006, so I think we got the resort folks beat by a little bit there. But our last contract expired December of 2006. Again, we're not immune to this economy. DSA members have felt the effects of it as well. We're part of and care about those communities that we serve, though. Our members and the public deserve sensible fiscal responsibility. Thus, we have provided proposals in the past to the county that offer, among other savings, increases in medical and retirement contributions, freezing wellness incentive pays, suspending floating and holiday pays, suspending meal reimbursements, suspending the on-duty workout and training program, and hiring and promotional freezes, among other proposals. We have also accepted and worked under the current expired contract and are prepared to continue such during this time. As I mentioned earlier, the 09 to 10 budgets within public safety have been met. Any perceived cost savings from an imposed contract will go to the county's reserve fund, according to your own negotiator's admission. I have tried, but I have no answer as to why funds from public safety budgets that have already been balanced would be taken and diverted into the reserve fund. Whether or not the current economic climate is suitable to try and obtain a labor contract is unknown. If this board deems a contract is necessary, we suggest both parties pursue mediation, just as the DSA agreed to your request back in the spring of 2007 to go to mediation. In the meantime, the DSA will continue to be open to negotiate with the county and provide reasonable solutions. I invite any of you to contact me if you desire more information before making your decision. The DSA is, as we have been throughout this process, committed to ensuring Placer County is a safe place to live, work, and visit. We ask for your assistance in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, public comment, or closed public comment. We'll move to supervisor committee reports. Over here.
I do have a couple of very quick things to report. I did meet with Assemblyman Dan Logue, just introduce myself since he's a new Assemblyman representing at least Serene Lakes, Nyack, a few other small areas within Placer County, just to make outreach to him and really let ourselves be known as an entity. He seems to be a gentleman willing to work with us. Also attended a SB 375 workshop in Oakland, which was very enlightening, very informative, and a little bit overwhelming, but I think it offers some opportunities to the county to move forward in addressing some of the laws on the state's books right now. And last, certainly not least, have been meeting on a monthly basis with Supervisor Ted Owens from Nevada County to work at some kind of buy-in inter-county issues. And he and I are making some really good progress on a number of fronts. And just wanted to let folks know that because we are such an intertwined area up here between Nevada and Placer counties, that Ted and I really are working to create some very positive things for members of both counties. And that's it.
All right, next item is consent agenda. Oh, there is a change in the minutes on page, should have turned to it right here. Be page 5 of our agenda. Under approve the minutes, it should read Tuesday, June 23rd instead of July 21st.
Chairman, I'd like to pull item number 16 off the consent agenda for public discussion, just in light of the fact that there's been some public concern about the step and merit increases, and just make that available, see if there's anyone in the public who would like to comment on that, or if the board would like to further discuss it.
Do I have a motion on the proposed changes to the consent agenda? Yes. Second. Roll call? Yes.
Yes.
Bueller?
Aye.
Montgomery?
Yes.
Yes. How do we take it?
Yes, should we move forward with item number 16 then? Item number 16 is a request by my office to approve a 5% merit increase for Linda P. Oakman, Administrative Services Manager, from grade 452 step 4 to grade 452 step 5 at $53.84 per hour, retroactive to this last January 3rd. I believe this is probably pulled because there's been some controversy to a degree about merit increases, and understanding that angst in there, as I think your board is aware, when we were able to reach agreement with the PPEO labor represented group, about 1,800 employees, to achieve the 5% cost savings, the 12 furlough days that were also imposed upon Management Confidential, ended up saving about $6.7 million in the agreement with PPO. was clearly that the ability to withhold merit increases was not part of the package. The reason why this one is on your agenda is that the managers and confidential, the managers one are by county code required to be approved by the Board of Supervisors. All those other merit increases are not approved by the Board of Supervisors, but nonetheless they occur as the employees qualify based upon an annual review process, and the merits are granted under that basis. So that's a pretty good background if that's what you're looking for.
That is, and I'd further like to mention that the merit raises that don't go to managers are largely invisible because, as Tom said, they're just sort of part of the process through agreements with the PPO, with the union. And I wanted to point out that last year we did have 750 merit raises, the bulk of which obviously were non-management, and really just wanted to take this opportunity to clarify the question about the merit raises, who is entitled to them. Everyone at the county is entitled to a series of step or merit raises. Well, not us, except the supervisors. Thank you, Jim. And those raises continue largely invisible to the public with the exception of management. And I just wanted to make that clear. I wanted to make sure the public understood both that and the process of how they work generally, and also have the ability to comment. So thank you for pulling it off the consent agenda, and thank you for that background, Tom.
Anybody wish to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. Do you have a motion?
Move to approve what was consent item 16. Merit raise for Ms. Oakman.
Roll call?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Now we'll move to the 9:15 item, a presentation by Jennifer Merchant to commending Barbara Young for over 34 years of dedicated public service as an employee of Placer County.
Bring before you today a resolution, as you said, commending Barbara Young for over 34 years of dedicated public service in Placer County. She has worked for the Placer County Executive Office for about the last 3 years. Most of her service to Placer County was in the Public Works Department. I probably shouldn't say this, but she likened coming to our department as being rescued from the pound. She was very happy after her many years to finally have a view of Lake Tahoe from her office, and certainly appreciated that. I do want to note importantly that her sense of humor has been one of the most uplifting things for me in working in our office. It's very stressful at times, and really her sense of humor has pulled us through quite a few stressing moments. She has an extremely just beyond average work ethic. She never says no to anything, and is always the first person, and has been like this throughout her career, to jump forward and say, I'm going to do this. Let me take care of that. She's going to be missed. She's absolutely irreplaceable. I want to put in, just as briefly as I can, a little bit of context what was happening in the world when she started working with Placer County in 1975. No cave paintings. That was good, Barb.
Work on dinosaurs?
Yeah. President Ford escaped an assassination attempt in Sacramento in 1975. It was the premiere year for Saturday Night Live, and George Carlin was the first host on that show. The first video game, Pong, was sold at Sears Roebuck.
That was a hot game.
Yeah, it was. The first fax machine was introduced. The record of the year at the Grammy Awards was I Honestly Love You by Olivia Newton-John. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest swept the Oscars. Are you seeing a path here? The Age Discrimination in Employment Act was passed by Congress, thank goodness. And The cost of a postage stamp was 10 cents. The average cost of a new home was $39,000. Median household income was $11,800. A gallon of gas was 44 cents. A pair of Foster Grants sunglasses was $5. And Barbara Young started working at Placer County for $3.02 an hour. So Barbara, if you wouldn't mind coming forward. I won't make you say anything because I know you're really not comfortable in the spotlight, and she almost didn't come here today. I was trying to sneak it on her. But I want to read this to you in public and embarrass you just a little bit more. In the matter of a resolution commending Barbara Young for over 30 years of dedicated public service as an employee of Placer County, whereas Barbara Young is retiring from the County of Placer after serving the citizens of this county for over 30 years, and whereas Barb's drive to always give more than what was asked of her led her to 4 promotions and 2 reclassifications during her career with Placer County. She is the first to notice something needs to be done and the first to jump in and do it. And whereas, as a DPW employee, she is remembered for filling sand trucks from a loader when she was very pregnant with her first son, and I got that from somebody who I won't name right now, and getting her Class B license so she could help move buses and other large equipment when needed at TART. Barb has performed with selfless service and conscientious attention to duty throughout her career. Whereas Barbara's initiative, experience, and quick wit served the county executive office well for 3 years of her career. If she didn't know the answer to something, she just figured it out, and taking on new and complex tasks with a confident smile. Whereas Barbara has not only served her community through her work with Placer County and concurrently raised 2 sons, she also serves on the Sierra Senior Services Board of Directors and leads their annual Pasta on the Lake fundraiser. Her dedication to the county, but mostly the citizens of the North Lake Tahoe community, was exemplary. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors, the County of Placer, on behalf of the citizens of Placer County, acknowledge with great appreciation Barbara Young's exceptional service and wish her well in her retirement and future pursuits.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you very much. This is really important. This is like frosting on the cake. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Don't eat it.
I didn't expect that, all that, and now I feel really old. And I'm going to go buy a Pong game, I think. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good luck. Great.
All right, we'll move on to the next item, number 2, the Community Development Resource Agency Surveying and Engineer, Mr. Zicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Wes Zicker from Engineering and Surveying. The action item before you is a request to conduct a public hearing about the renaming of Agatam Avenue into East and West Agatam, as shown on page 3 of your staff report. I'd like to introduce Rebecca Tabor, who has been working on this for us, one of our senior engineers, and she'll give you a brief description of the item. Thank you.
Good morning. Agatam Avenue is located in the Tahoe Vista area, and let me make sure I know what I'm doing. Okay. To give you location, it's a looped roadway, it's a public roadway, and it connects to Highway 28 in 2 locations, National Avenue on the west and Highway 267 to the east. Here's an aerial view. This just gives you some landmarks. Here's Lake Tahoe, Highway 28. And here's our addressing map. Last fall, the Tahoe Assessor's Office contacted the Engineering and Surveying Department and notified us of duplicate addresses on Agatam Avenue. We looked into it. We found that there were multiple duplicate addresses, and there is also non-sequential numbering along this roadway. The roadway should the numbers should proceed in one direction along its entire length. Well, the road numbers actually proceed to about this location in one direction, and on the east side they proceed to about Pinot Avenue here in this direction. So first we contacted the fire district and emergency response agencies. They were aware of this situation. They were already informally referring to the roadway as West Agatam and East Agatam in order to respond. 911 calls, things like that. So the first thing that our department did is we balloted all of the residents along the roadway. We gave them a choice. Would they like to rename the road or renumber their properties? The ballots came back, and 71% of those balloted were in favor of a road name change. At this time, the Engineering and Surveying Department is recommending renaming the road. This portion from 28 to the intersection of Pinot Avenue would be called West Agatam Avenue, and this portion from Pinot Avenue to Highway 28 would be East Agatam Avenue. We would discontinue the road name, the use of the road name Agatam Avenue. This would formalize the road names already being used by the fire district and emergency response. This would improve public health and safety as far as reducing potential delays in response times. It would also be in support of the residents' wishes to rename the road. This item was heard by both the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission, and the outcome in both cases was a unanimous recommendation of approval to your board. In conclusion, please conduct a public hearing to consider this item and authorize the chairman to execute the attached resolution. And we're available for questions if you have any.
Are there any questions before I open up the hearing? Okay, I will open up the public hearing. Anybody wishing to comment on this item, please come forward. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Move approval to adopt a resolution renaming Agatam Avenue to West Agatam Avenue and East Agatam Avenue, with the split occurring at the intersection of Pinot Avenue.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Name change official. Yeah, we're going to go to number 6 now. Department items. Mr. Durfee. Let's do 6. Are you going to do them separately, A, B, A and B?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Jim Durfee with Facility Services. Joel Swift take these first 4 items.
Okay.
Thank
That's
you.
right, you already told me that. I forgot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of your board. Item 6A, and there's actually 2 items here before your board that concern project number 4625C, construction of the Department of Public Works Operations and Maintenance Facility, Cabin Creek. During the course of the construction of this project, the original contractor defaulted, resulting in a takeover by their bonding insurance company to complete the project. The project now is presently substantially complete, with a full move-in by Department of Public Works by September. There are sufficient funds in the capital project for both of these first two recommendations. Item 6AA is to ratify the amendment number 4 to the consultant services agreement with Carter & Burgess Incorporated, the architects and engineers on the project, to provide additional architectural engineering services to support the project. It's recommended that your board ratify that amendment and authorize the chairman of the board to execute agreement number 4, increasing the contract amount by $67,500 for total contract cost not to exceed of $864,500. Through the course of the project, there were several amendments, as we normally have in a contract, in accordance with the scope and schedule of the project. However, with the default of the contractor, it required additional architectural engineering services to maintain the support of the project and to complete the transition from the contractor to the sureties contractor to complete the project. And therefore, Carter & Burgess Incorporated needed additional support for their architectural engineering services beyond their original contract amount. It is therefore recommended that your board ratify amendment number 4 with Carter & Burgess in the amount of $67,500 for a revised not to exceed contract amount of $864,500. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding this item from your board.
No questions? Jennifer?
Just to be clear, we had an initial contract, it was defaulted upon, this is a new contractor who's come in?
That's correct. The initial contractor for the construction defaulted, and through our bonding process, their bonding insurance company took over, completed the project over the course of this last year, and during that time, that required additional support from our architect and engineer of this contract with Carter and Burgess.
Thank you.
I should have not put that in my mouth. Anybody wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Move approval.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Item B.
Thank you. Item B is sort of the sister item. We have a second contract with a construction manager, Harris & Associates, and this would be a recommendation for your board to approve amendment number 3 to their agreement number 12271A with Harris & Associates for construction management services for the same project, and authorize the chairman to execute the amendment increase of their contract by $110,484 for a total contract costs not to exceed of $857,805. I might add that with that amount, with the total construction of the project just under $5 million, it amounts to about 17.3% of construction, which is extremely high. However, it again is a result of having to have an extra year of construction management service to manage this takeover contract from the defaulted contractor. So with that, it's a request that your board approve and authorize the chairman to execute agreement number 3 with Harrison Associates in the amount of $110,484.
Any questions? Anybody in the audience wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Move approval.
All in favor? Aye.
If I could interject just for a moment. I wanted to thank County Counsel's office and Joel and his staff, and a special thanks to DPW for being so patient. Every once in a while you run into a project like this one, and I think in a lot of our experiences this is maybe the worst contract we've ever seen. It was a very difficult process. It took a long time, and actually when we got the bonding company, this will tell you how bad the project was going. When we got the bonding company involved, they looked at it and said, "Yep, we'll pay for it." They didn't. It was very easy to work through that process, and usually those folks are not in a big hurry to spend their money. So kudos to everybody involved.
Item B.
Thank you. Item B is recommended that your board approve an agreement with Vanner Construction Management Incorporated to provide design construction management services for the South Placer Adult Correction Facility, project number 4764, which is located in Roseville, and authorize the chairman to execute the agreement in an amount not to exceed of $3,255,114 for the design and construction management services for the project. As a matter of background, on January 22nd of 2008, your board approved an initial agreement with Vanner to provide services through the design-build selection process of this project. Vanner has demonstrated their qualifications and value as a consultant throughout that selection process, which culminated on June 23rd, 2009 with the award of the design-build contract to McCarthy Building Companies Incorporated. As indicated on the January 22nd, 2008 discussion, staff is returning to your board with an agreement for these services with Vanner. The project is now entering the design and construction phase, which requires skills relevant to the design review and construction management services, cost control, estimating, schedule management, building inspection, and quality assurance for an estimated 30 months of design and construction. Staff has successfully negotiated an agreement with Vanner to provide these design and construction management services. In order to proceed, staff is requesting that your board approve and authorize the chairman to execute the agreement with Vanner Construction Management for these services in an amount of not to exceed of $3.25 million. And this is consistent with the contract award to McCarthy Building Companies on June 23rd of this year. The total construction cost of the project is expected to be $82 million of an estimated total project cost of $98.2 million. The cost for the design and construction management services with Vanner was anticipated in the project budget, and there is sufficient funding appropriated in the capital project fund for this particular contract. I will say that this, in terms of a measuring stick, I mentioned with the previous project, This amounts to roughly 2.2% of construction, much larger scale project, but a different delivery method altogether. And we really negotiated a lot of options in there. This is the worst case scenario in terms of services with these folks. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions your board may have on this item.
Any questions? Anyone in the audience have any questions or want to make a comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. C.
Finally, a bit of good news on the bidding front. We have in front of you an item for a recommendation to award a contract for another construction contract for the Colfax Library renovation project number 4765 to Hometown Construction Incorporated in the amount of $696,000, and upon approval of County Council and Risk Management, authorize the Director of Facility Services to execute a contract and any required change orders consistent with the County Purchasing Manual and Section 20142 of the Public Contract Code. Back in April 7th of this year, your board approved plans and specifications and authorized solicitation of bids for this project. Bid solicitations were advertised in accordance with the Public Contract Code, and documents were sent to 60 contractors and 6 building exchanges. Bids were opened by Procurement Services on June 24th of this year, and we resulted in 22 bids, of which 17 were under budget. So we did really well in terms of very competitive environment right now. The apparent low bidder is Hometown Construction Incorporated of Rio Linda, California, with a base bid of $696,000. The staff estimate was $815,000. So in order to proceed, it is requested that your board award the bid pursuant to the Purchasing Policy Manual. The total project cost is estimated at $1.341 million, including this construction contract, $652,000 for architectural engineering fees, project management, bidding, abatement, permit fees, inspections, contingency, and there is sufficient funding appropriated in the capital funds projects fund account to provide full funding for this project. With that, I'd answer any questions from your board.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, which is such a fantastic response to the RFP, and the fact that this bid came in at almost $120,000 below what we estimated, what we thought it might cost. Is just it's wonderful. Just wanted to congratulate you at Facilities on handling this so well and getting such a great response.
Thank you.
We're very hopeful that there is a double-edged sword with these low bids. When everybody's stacked up at the bottom, that means that there was no slack left in the bid at all. They're very tight. So we'll watch the project accordingly.
Thank you.
Have a good bonding agency.
That's right.
We have full confidence in Hometown. That's not to disparage them in any way, shape, or form. It's simply that we know that there's no fat left in these contracts.
Any other questions? Anybody in the audience wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Move approval.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Mr. Durfee,
Thank you, Joel.
number D.
I have an item for your board that is a recommendation that you adopt a resolution authorizing the chairman to sign the 9th Amendment to the Agreement for Solid Waste Handling Services between Placer County and Tahoe Truckee Disposal and the Placer County Eastern Regional Landfill, Inc., and I will shorten that as I go on. The amendment compensates ERL, Inc. for increased out-of-state disposal fees at the Lockwood landfill that are due to changes in regulations at that landfill, and then equipment upgrades needed to comply with the California Air Resources Board clean air requirements, and then secondly, that you approve a budget revision canceling $81,834 in reserves from the ERL budget and $305,419 in reserves from the solid waste management budget in order to fund the one-time costs. We've been in agreement with ERL TTD since July of 2003 for collection and transportation and processing of solid waste on the eastern side of the county, essentially from Colfax to the Nevada state line. When we were negotiating that contract back in 2003, we knew that the CARB requirements were changing. They were evolving at that point in time, and there was no real clarity as to where they were going to land. So rather than try to build in something into the fees paid to ERL at that point in time, we waited until the new regulations came out. we put an opener in the contract specifically for this purpose, so that we could address the changes in costs. It's consistent with our contracting practices where we do compensate the contractors for unanticipated changes in costs. This is clearly something that everybody that operates diesel equipment is dealing with. So what we've done is we've negotiated in essence, a one-time payment for the changes in the CARB regulations, and we do recommend that your board make that payment. The other piece of this is essentially changes their operations fee by 90 cents per ton in order to cover the increased cost of disposal at the Lockwood landfill. What's happened there is that previously Lockwood was not required to put daily cover on their site. Typical landfill practice in California would be that you would put a foot of soil or some other type of cover over the waste at night. That was not the regulation in Nevada until recently. Now they are having to do that, and they've passed that increased cost on to customers. This is a direct pass-through of a cost from the county to ERL. There's no markup on this, so it's a direct pass-through of that. Neither of these recommendations will cause a recommendation from Facility Services to change the tipping fees or the collection fees. We're taking care of this out of reserves. We have built into our fee program, we are always looking at these kinds of unanticipated costs, so we have that built into our fee program already. So we're not recommending that we pass any of these cost increases on to the customers. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, but would recommend your approval.
Seeing no questions, anyone in the audience wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board, and that will be action on D, 1 and 2. Can we take it all in one? Okay. So do I have a motion?
Move approval D, 1 and 2.
Second. Roll call.
Yes.
Yep. Yes. Okay. Now we'll go to
Thank you, Greg.
our 10 o'clock item. We got 3 minutes.
You want to do the 10 o'clock item first?
Well,
Me.
I've got 3 minutes till, but I don't think we have enough time to do any of these others.
You could go later with the 10 o'clock item, proceed with item E, but I'm sure it'll take some time. Your agenda will.
Yeah,
rather slow
the next
down.
department item will take, I'm sure it'll take a few minutes.
And I think there's quite a few people in the audience for this one, so you might.
Do excuse myself and be right back.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break? That took care of the time.
Timed item is a recommendation that your board hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution approving a sewer system management plan for Placer County's sewer service areas in accordance with the California State Water Resources Control Board's requirements, and that you authorize the Director of Facility Services to approve future modifications to the SSMPs as necessary. This is an item that's been in the works for a couple of years now. The state of California requires that all sewer collection systems have a sewer system management plan. It talks about you have to assess the condition of the plant of the systems. It talks about how you will implement improvements and maintenance, and more specifically, it really talks about how we deal with sewer spills, how you respond, how the reporting works. It's pretty much a pro forma plan that we put together for compliance. It does require that your board adopt it formally, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. It's essentially what it does is it formalizes the practices that we've had in place for many years in terms of how we respond to sewer overflows.
Anyone in the audience have any questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Approval?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Now we're in the same pickle we were before. Huh? Okay. We will go to E.
Okay, thank you.
Site selection for the government center.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Jim Durfee with Facility Services. I have with me Lori Morse, who's a senior project manager with the Property Management Division, and Lori's done a massive amount of the staff work on this project, and so I wanted to thank her for an awful lot of good work. This is a follow-up to our discussion the last time we were up at this end of the county in April, where I gave a very detailed presentation on our site selection process for a government center to be ultimately located here in the Tahoe region. At that meeting, we did give a very detailed analysis and update on all of the sites. I'm going to very briefly go through some background today and then talk about some specific requested actions. We are recommending today that you confirm that the BB LLC Option 1 in Kings Beach is the top-ranked Tahoe Government Center site. We're asking that you authorize Facility Services to negotiate a master agreement with BB LLC, which will ultimately define the material terms for a lease purchase agreement for that project, including some very key approval and construction milestones, and also that you direct us to return to your board for approval of that agreement upon completion of those negotiations. Very quickly, I'll go through some background. Back in 2006, the board authorized us to proceed with a site solicitation to acquire property for a future government site somewhere in the Tahoe region. And I'll emphasize that again. Our plan as we set out was to purchase a piece of property. The purpose of this government center was to consolidate a number of county departments and divisions into an efficient county-owned facility. Most of these, or if not all of these, offices actually are now in lease spaces, and since we stay in business essentially forever, notwithstanding state budgets, since we stay in business forever, it's pretty quick math to figure out that we're a lot better off to own our buildings than to just pay leases in perpetuity. Ultimately, the intent of the project was to put the Community Development Resources Agency, Environmental Health Division, the CEO's office, and various divisions there from the Department of Public Works that's currently located in Truckee, actually in Nevada County, the Assessor's Office, and then some other agencies who could potentially co-locate with us, such as TRPA and the Air Pollution Control District. The initial site solicitation identified a number of preferred site attributes. We wanted it in Placer County, proximate to highways 2889 or 267. We knew that we needed a minimum of about 2.2 acres in order to accommodate the building footprint size that we needed and on-site parking. And we needed convenient year-round access to I-80. We also wanted to look at access to existing and then future alternative transportation modes. The site had to have development capability. We needed access to infrastructure, limited grading or soil preparation, limited environmental constraints, and it was a high priority that the site be within a redevelopment area. These were the attributes that we asked proposers to meet as they proposed properties to us. We needed various compatible land uses nearby. Proximate locations to public, industrial, or commercial uses were very preferable. We didn't want to convert any land currently used for grazing or timber production or that was designated as open space. So we set out a number of different attributes, and as a result, we had initially we had about a dozen properties submit. We willowed those down, ultimately down to the 4 or 5 options that your board gave us direction on back in April. The board has taken a number of actions on this project over the years. In 2007, you asked us to really zero in on a number of properties. Tahoe City Trading Post, which later withdrew, the owners withdrew from that. The Kings Beach BB LLC properties, which is one of the projects that we're talking about today. In fact, it's the subject of our recommendation. And then a parcel out in Martis Valley. Later that in 2008, you eliminated that Timolek property and directed us to really work with BBLLC to see how their process was going to work, the CEP process that they're in with TRPA, and you also at that point in time asked us to continue to pursue new property leads because we were continuing to have properties come to the table. This culminated on April 21st, 3 months ago, with the update that I spoke about earlier. And at that particular meeting, your board actually indicated that one of the 3 properties that was on the table at that time, located at Dollar Hill, really was not a good candidate from your board's perspective. Its distance to commercial areas, and that you strongly expressed a preference towards the Kings Beach BBLLC option 1 or 2 alternatives, and that you asked us to really prioritize our site selection criteria and come back to your board with a recommendation at this meeting. We've done that. Very briefly, the options that were still on the table as of April were 3 different options at the BBLLC site located in Kings Beach. The first option was the one that your board expressed a preference for in April. That's the original lease purchase option. It's a turnkey project where we would essentially, the developer would develop a project and all of the associated parking, and we would simply move in, start leasing the project. We would negotiate a defined term for that lease, and at the end of it's a lease purchase. At the end of that term, we would own the building and own our share of the parking lot. Option 2 would be to acquire about 8/10 of an acre, fully entitled for us to construct our own building, and we would do that. We would also own 63 spaces in the parking garage, co-own that with BBLLC. Option 3 was to acquire actually 2 acres to get us back to that 2-acre minimum that we talked about in our criteria, unentitled, and then at some point in time we would construct on that. The 4th option, or the second property that your board asked us to take further look at and continue to evaluate, was the Tahoe City, the Tahoe Tree Company property. It's approximately 10 acres. It already has a 6,000 square foot building on it, and in that option we would at some point move into that building, but we would construct our own building at our own pace at some point in the future. I am not going to go through this information. This is the kind of the pros and cons pro forma information. Your board has already seen that in our previous presentations. The final evaluation process, what we did was we listened very closely to the comments that your board made in April, and we put together an evaluation tool that essentially is just a 100-point scoring tool. And we made our very best efforts to have that scoring tool relate to what we heard you say were your priorities for the selection of a site. In any of these kinds of scoring tools, you could come up with a lot of different answers. I suspect if we asked the 50 people in the room today to each fill out a scoring tool, we'd end up with 50 different scores for sure, perhaps different recommendations. We tried not to bias that discussion at all, or our ranking and scoring on any of the categories. We tried to do that basically simply by applying what we had heard that you folks said, and I think the relevant question for us today, from us to you, is did we do that? Did we hit those points that were important to you? So if we did not, I certainly need to hear that and know about that today. In any event, the scoring tool, what we heard you say was that revitalization was one of your highest priorities, probably was your highest priority, so we gave that 35 points. Cost was the second most important, and it's related there as 30 points. Risk was also important to your board, and so we gave that 25 points. And then those various facilities issues that we talked about in terms of expandability, the county's ability to kind of have its own course of action, its own way, those things were less important to your board, so we gave them 10 points. I will also note that in this process, we were also asked to do a survey of the county employees that are up here at the lake. And we did that. We asked a number of questions about where their customers come from, how many trips they make a day, a lot of those different kinds of things. The results of that survey were considered and incorporated in the evaluation tool. So that information was thought through as we went through the various criteria. To drill into this a little bit more specifically, in the 35 points for revitalization, what we identified were these various different items that were each given a ranking and a score. The degree of economic benefit to county and community, catalyst to redevelopment by bringing synergy into the community, opportunity for county leadership in redevelopment efforts, provision of off-hour community benefits, things such as parking and so forth. In looking at cost, we looked at the lowest pro forma project costs, flexibility in timing the project funding, ability for the county to implement competitive cost strategies, leverage of other partners' participation if we were to bring in other tenants into the facility from other agencies. In terms of risk, some of the things we looked at were entitlement and project approvals. Any project has entitlement needs. Some of the projects that we looked at are going to be more difficult to entitle than others. Different levels of review will be required. So we gave scores based on those things. The physical risks in terms of environmental demolition, grading, and I don't mean demolishing the environment, grading and land coverage, dependence on development partners, and community opposition. So we gave scores to each of those things. And then finally, the facilities issues we looked at were proximity to future development areas, walkable, pedestrian, bus-oriented commercial locations. Those were things that we heard were important from your board's perspective. Traffic constraints, advisory board and county employee support and preference, and then accommodation of our facility requirements. These are the gross score results from the evaluation process that we went through at Facility Services. You can see that the original option 1 is the highest ranked, BBLLC original option 1 is the highest ranked project at 74.5 points. The option 2 was actually only 1 point behind that. Option 3 we don't believe is a good option because it essentially dismantles that site as a development site. It would put a lot of major constraints on developing the rest of the site, in our opinion. And then the Tahoe Tree project site was actually ranked 3rd in these rankings. Our recommendation in terms of sites, because of the benefits that accrue from the BBLLC option 1, and in listening to what was important to your board back at the April meeting, we believe that because of the revitalization, the opportunity to locate the government center in a walkable commercial location that's near a number of different future development areas, the potential cost savings and earlier delivery of a project through a lease purchase structure, and then deferral of the county's initial lease payment until the project's complete, so we wouldn't actually start spending money on this until probably fiscal year 13-14. For those reasons, the BBLLC option 1 was ranked as our number one site. I do want to talk a little bit about risk, though. While BBLLC option 1 is our highest ranked site and it is the subject of our recommendation today, we do believe that it carries a great amount of risk with it in terms of the deliverability. Frankly, we have great confidence in Mr. Brown. He's an accomplished developer. I have no qualms whatsoever about his ability to get a project done. However, the project is a CEP project in the TRPA process. I think your board is acutely aware of how that process is proceeding or not proceeding at this point in time. There will be a complex EIR that goes along with this project. There's always a lot of risk when you do a large, significant EIR like that. The current economic times are difficult at best, so it's difficult to predict how financing and how the project will work out. That said, that does not change my recommendation to your board today. I just want you to be very aware that there will be a number of milestones to meet as we move forward on this project, and there is some risk involved with it. There are also some fiscal considerations that your board, I believe I've informed you of this as we've gone along, but I want to be very sure that we all understand it. We have identified $6.5 million in the capital facilities finance plan for this project. As I said earlier, our original intention was simply to buy a piece of land. The CFFP does not identify the remainder of the funding for the construction of this facility, and frankly, nor do the financial projections that the CEO's office provides for your board in terms of future budget years. If your board takes our recommendation today and we send down this path towards entering into an actual agreement with BB LLC, I will have to come back to your board with an update to the CFFP and identify projects within that plan that can either be delayed or modified in some way in order to find the funding in the future to complete this project. We can find that money. I'm not telling you that we can't do that, but it will require perhaps some reprioritization of projects in that CFFP in order to do that. We really don't believe that option 2, and we put this note in here just so that you know. There's a very near-term funding requirement for option 2, BBLLC option 2. We'd essentially have to go out and borrow money in order to take option 2. So even though it was the second highest ranked option, from a fiscal perspective, we don't believe it's viable because we'd have to come up with a lot more money right up front. Option 1, the lease payments would be deferred for some time until completion of construction. So just for disclosure purposes, I wanted to let you know that we will have to come back with modifications to the CFFP. The Tahoe Tree Company project, on the other hand, the purchase of the property would likely fall within our budgetary allocations at this point in time. To kind of put a little bit of emphasis on this, I wanted to show you on 2 different scenarios for the cost that will be associated with option 1. In the first column, we have a 7-year 7% lease purchase. These are not negotiated numbers yet. These are simply to show you the order of magnitude and the scale of what we'll be dealing with. The amount that we would finance under this project would be about $19.3 million. We'd be making a $7.1 million initial payment, and then our long-term obligations, which is the remainder of that capital and interest, would be $25.2 million, with in this particular case, a $3.6 million annual payment. If we were to negotiate a 15-year deal, same interest rate for that project, you can see the comparison of the numbers. The overall cost goes up because we're financing over a longer period of time. We'll be paying more interest. However, the annual payments go down. So we will be, should your board take our recommendation today and authorize us to negotiate, we will be working with Mr. Brown to come up with different scenarios for your board to consider when we come back in terms of the ongoing costs. Next steps moving forward, if your board takes our recommendations today and confirms the ranking and authorizes us to proceed, we will enter into that process of negotiating a master agreement. I would expect that would take a few months. I would anticipate being able to be back perhaps late autumn with a master agreement. It is a complex agreement, a number of different things to work our way through. We have some experience with it, though. This is exactly the process we took with the South Placer Justice Center, now the Santucci Centers. This is how we purchased that and constructed the courts. Dependent on the terms of the lease purchase agreement, the annual payments and overall capital outlay will change, and we'll be working with the CEO's office and the county's finance team in order to come up with a plan. If this is the desire of the board, we'll be coming up with working with those groups to come up with a plan to finance with feasible payments. And we will also be returning to the board, as I said, with recommended adjustments to the capital facility finance plan. Again, my recommendation today is that you confirm that the BBLLC option 1 is your first ranked site, and that you authorize facility services to enter into negotiations for a master agreement. We would, of course, be returning to your board for approval of that agreement upon completions. And I will add that by a separate item today, following this one, I will also be recommending that your board authorize me to enter into negotiations with the owners of the Tahoe Tree Company property for an option on that property, so that we can hold that in option and exercise that option should an unforeseen failure come about on the delivery of BBLLC option 1. That's simply a backstop so that we protect our interests at this point in time. We've got a huge investment in time and effort into this process. The market is very good right now for properties, and I will be recommending that we enter into an option as well. So I wanted to put that in the table. That is actually the next item on your agenda. With that, Lori and I are very available to answer questions that you may have, and I know there are a number of members of the public that are here to speak to this issue.
Robert has a question. Jim, first of all, thank you both for a huge amount of great work that I think did reflect the concerns and priorities and questions that the board has. But I guess I have a little bit of a potential concern, depending on your answer, about proceeding with staff recommendation, but then being very concerned about the resulting impact that it has on the current facilities master plan. And there might be my favorite project that you come back and recommend that in order to continue with your recommendation, my favorite project on the existing facilities master plan gets delayed for the next 25 years. So could you describe, in looking at the numbers though, I'm not that panicked. I don't have the facilities master plan in front of me, but the lease purchase options look like they're not so compelling that it's going to preclude a lot of good options. But I do want to know that if that concern ends up being real, I'm not going to endorse your recommendation and get so far down the road that I can't address that secondary concern.
I think you bring up a very good point. Of course, the dynamics of the capital facilities finance plan are such that your board has, over the years, made annual contributions into those capital reserves, and we've also utilize tobacco securitization funds and capital facility impact fees. So there are a number of different revenue sources to that fund. So the health of that fund is directly connected to the health of the economy in general. Right now, we're not putting any monies into that fund, so things are slowed down in terms of our long-term cash flow into that fund already. My recommendation will be that we come back to your board very soon with the update to the capital facilities plan, so that we have that discussion and information before we go very far down a path of negotiation. My recommendation would be that we have that discussion concerning the facilities plan well up front of the point in time where I would be able to come back to your board with a recommendation on the master agreement.
And then, if you would, thanks for that answer. But historically, with all of the facilities that we've built in the last 15-ish years, we have done it with very little debt, but a prospective safety valve to keep the facilities plan on track. And in light of this economy, that might be an option that actually is even more appealing in the sense that interest rates are so cheap, and our risk is very good. So if you'd factor that into your analysis and report back on that as you go forward.
We will do that. The county's finance team, CEO's office, facility services, auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector, we meet on approximately a quarterly basis to look at those things. This will be the topic of discussion at our next meeting.
Thanks.
Yep, the 15-year lease payment option had an annual payment of 2 point what? What was was it 2.4? Thank you, 2.4. What are our current annual rent obligations that will be obviated by a consolidation of those different services into this building? I hope so. She's been working on this long enough.
Our annual rents are about $250,000 a year.
I'm sorry?
About $250,000 a year.
The reduction in rents was never a compelling argument here. It's simply a long-term provision of service issue.
No, I'm just trying to get an idea of the cost, the new magnitude of the annual payment.
It's significant, tenfold.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a couple clarifying questions. Jamie, you talked about the potential risks involved, and I'm now going to put on my governing board hat for the TRPA and just bring up the fact that we seem to be being sued on everything at the moment, whether it's a CEP project or a traditional project. Do you see a real difference between the BBLLC project being a CEP and, for lack of a better term, a traditional project? Just in terms of that downside for risk?
Frankly, no. It's been, and Tony may want to jump in if he feels so. It's our experience over the last few years that a significant proportion of environmental reviews get sued. The key is to put together a good document, do good analysis, mitigate appropriately so that you win those lawsuits. But my experience over the last number of years is that you almost can't avoid being sued on a number of these issues, and I really don't see a significant difference in that exposure based on the two processes. If there's somebody that's opposed to the project that wants to sue, they will sue.
Okay.
The CEP process may better position ourselves to win that lawsuit.
Okay. Then, in terms of the fiscal impact regarding Tahoe Tree, you had said that the purchase price would fall within the existing monies that we've allocated, and I believe by implication the facilities capital plan.
Correct.
Short term. Long term, is there really any difference? I mean, would construction on the Tahoe Tree site at some point in the future also impact the facilities capital plan?
It would, but the difference being simply that the county would have full discretion over when that happens. It could be many years in the future before we actually took that type of construction on. We could wait for the economy to get back to normal so that we could have a better predictability in the flow of funds into the capital plan. That's really the major difference. The project at Tahoe Tree is estimated to be somewhat less expensive, but the big benefit is that we could do it whenever we choose to rather than commit immediately to spending money.
And so by whenever we choose to, that would be dependent upon the market. So it could be 10 years,
correct.
15 years, who knows? I mean, really.
We could do it when we have a convergence of need and ability at the same time. We have the need all of the time.
Yeah.
But and it really fits our typical model better, which is a kind of a pay-as-you-go model, although we have done some financing over the years. But typically your board has wanted to pay as we go. However, the lease purchase model is a very convenient financing model for us. It has proven to work very well.
Okay, that's all I have for clarifying questions right now. Thank you.
Anyone in the public want to comment on this item? May we have your name, please, and address for the record, please? You're going to need that.
Good morning, Chairman Rockholm and Supervisors. My name is Justin Brolio. I'm the Executive Director of the Tahoe City Downtown Association. I'm here today on behalf of my Board of Directors and our organization's more than 100 businesses and property owners in Tahoe City who would like to see this project built on the Tahoe Tree Company site. I'm not here today, as some may think, to advocate our community would be better than their community, or that one place is better than the other. I'm not here today to condemn my neighbors, friends, and partners in Kings Beach for their desire to revitalize their downtown, as we have ours. I'm here to simply remind you that as defined in the TCDA's scope of work with the county, our mission and goal is to promote a prosperous and vibrant commercial and social center in downtown Tahoe City for the residents of and visitors to our community. A specific deliverable in that scope of work is to collaborate with Placer County on all implementation and revitalization projects and redevelopment efforts. We believe that losing 30 employees and potentially our nursery and a strong business in downtown Tahoe City does not serve that goal and does not sound execution of the revitalization efforts stated by yourself in previous meetings regarding this project. While we understand the need for redevelopment in Kings Beach and support any efforts to keep this project on the North Shore, we must strongly recommend that you consider and look at the benefits of the Tahoe Tree Company site for several reasons. Number one, not because we want it in our town versus their town, but because of the same reasons it would benefit Kings Beach, it would benefit downtown Tahoe City at, from my point of view, what seems to be much less significant cost and significant risk to the county, specifically during these adverse economic times and in the midst of this morning's budget announcements from the governor. I'll let my board of directors and additional folks in the audience speak to additional benefits of the Tahoe Tree Company site. But thank you for your time today and understanding this critical decision for the North Shore. And while the agenda shows staff recommendations for Kings Beach, we simply ask that you don't forget Tahoe City and neglect the scope of work that we've been tasked with by the redevelopment agency and yourselves. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Carol Savory, and I currently serve as board president of the North Tahoe Business Association. And our mission is to promote the economic well-being of our district. So, of course, I'm here to support the staff recommendation of having Kings Beach be the government center location. A couple points I'd like to make. Clearly, it's revitalization in both redevelopment districts. In the Kings Beach area and the adjacent properties to that potential government center site, there is very little standard building structure or any development at all. Currently, a lot of that property is vacant. To have a year-round anchor tenant would be a very pivotal what's the word I'm looking for, catalyst, if you will, for our area and its economic well-being. We have dramatic improvement to make, and it is a redevelopment district, and the tax increment financing that would come from the improvement in Kings Beach, I would think, would have to be significant in the long run. And I don't know if that's been factored into, certainly not the cost, but the economic benefits over time, and if there's been any monetary assessment made on that front. Also, having that government center in Kings Beach year-round, we're losing businesses pretty regularly. We just lost another one this month, and this is our peak tourist season, and it was a seemingly viable business. So we're in the down spiral. I realize this is not an immediate project, but if our government center is there, it's hard to imagine who would want to be an anchor tenant in an area where there aren't many businesses or infrastructure in that area. So we encourage you to support the project to help us revitalize. Thank you.
Thank you.
9910 Whitecap Lane, Kings Beach. I recommended the county to place the actual government center there at the BBLC Town Center. I believe this will leverage the county's over $40 million that you're going to invest in the Kings Beach Core Improvement Project, the seed funding that you've already spent through your redevelopment agency to enable Mr. Brown to move forward, and also support one of our CEP programs. Even though I know it's CEPs could go in sideways direction, I think it's a wonderful CEP project and a great demonstration of all the different things that we've talked about in our place-based design. Additionally, by placing the government center at BBLC's project, the county will have a multiplier economic impact of jobs, retail sales, and act as a necessary anchor for the town center. And finally, the county and BB LLC have spent over a year plus in fine-tuning the financial model to execute the project, and appears to be a realistic, executable project compared to the Tahoe Tree Company site. I urge you to move forward quickly in securing the relationship with BB LLC and to place the Tahoe Government Center in Kings Beach. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ellie Waller, Tahoe Vista resident. Both Tahoe City and Kings Beach communities have made compelling comments. Although one criterion that stood out was the purchase or owning the property as an objective clearly stated that the county wanted to relinquish their leases. Why lease to own? Another criterion was expansion capability. That speaks for itself. With the approval of the Government Center in Kings Beach and the option you have selected, you have predetermined the need for the parking structure. This may be the first and hopefully the only parking structure in the North Shore. Have you made provisions for securing parking if the structure is found not to be financially feasible or environmentally viable? Thank you.
Good morning. John Heitch. I'm with Tahoe Tree Company with my wife Leslie. I'd like to thank Jim and Jennifer for coming out to see our property. Jim this morning and Jennifer last week. Thank you. Wish you other folks had a chance. You had a conflict yesterday. We understand. We like our property for the site. We're able to keep the nursery there on a long-term basis with a lease back, which we think is important for the community. Any other developer comes along, wants to write us a check, we may take it, and our nursery will be gone, and we don't want that to happen. That's why we've invested energy and time into your process and hopefully make this work. I would urge you guys to look at this evaluation tool very carefully and the numbers assigned to it. There's only a 7-point difference, and if you guys ask some hard questions, 7 points determines you guys spending $5 to $15 more, $1 million more over in Kings Beach. Thank you. Any questions from you guys of me? Thank you.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Mia Kong, and I'm with Domus Development. We are a developer out of San Francisco, and we are currently working on the Kings Beach Housing Now CEP project in Kings Beach. I wanted to support staff's recommendation for the BBLLC project. It's instrumental in terms of creating an anchor for Kings Beach. The revitalization of Kings Beach is incredibly needed, as I think everyone has seen. The CEP projects, as controversial as they are, will mark progress. And I think dedication, perseverance to move it forward is a vision that is shared by many residents in terms of the Pathways 2000, in terms of the walkability, the support of transit. The location is key in terms of its central location to Kings Beach, its access to many things, and I just strongly recommend staff's recommendation for the approval of BBLLC's project. I think will make a demonstrable difference, and not to mention the fact that there's been tremendous environmental studies, planning, and everything that has gone into this project, which, as everyone knows, is quite complicated. And to be able to take that advantage and move this project forward quickly, I think will show signs of progress and revitalization for Kings Beach. Thank you.
Good morning, Gary Davis, Civil Engineer, Design and Engineering, 165 River Road, Tahoe City. I speak to you this morning as a personal friend of the Heitches and Tahoe Tree Company for 20 years, also as a businessman and property owner of commercial and other property in the Tahoe City area. One of my main concerns is the loss of the jobs, almost 40 jobs that are currently on the West Shore there in those offices, and to relocate that to Kings Beach. We support redevelopment in Kings Beach. I think everybody is on the same team here for both Kings Beach and Tahoe City and the North Shore generally. But there's some inherent problems. Right now there's 90,000 square feet of vacant commercial floor space in the Tahoe City area. Our economy, as well as Kings Beach, is in a bit of a hurt at the moment. And to again replace that would be harmful for the long-term commercial interests of Tahoe City. The loss of jobs is also significant. Right now, there's probably a ratio of 5 to 1 architects and engineers offices in close proximity to the building department, health department, planning department in Tahoe City. They've relocated there over whatever it is, 30 or 40 years that has been in Tahoe City. There's probably a ratio of 5 to 1 versus the number of professionals in Kings Beach. We're there because of the proximity of these offices and the ease of us meeting with the planning department, the health department, the businesses. It's very convenient. It's also convenient from a geographical point of view if you're coming from where some of our projects are on the summit or other parts of Squaw Valley, Alpine Meadows, even North Star. We're very conveniently located at the corner of 89 basically and Highway 28 there, which is easy access during the winter months. I see some difficulties with the BBLLC project, and I'm not here to bash it, but the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency has a history of not performing in the greatest manner. The CEP process has been a debacle from the beginning. There's no confidence from us professionals who deal with TRPA for 20 years in and out that they can actually complete this process with the CEP and give the entitlements that are necessary to make the BBC project viable. There looks to me that there's the potential for height restrictions and coverages that are not going to be able to be passed. We won't know until we go down this long road of a couple years through a full-blown EIR and other documents for environmental review. But I really highly doubt that they're going to get the entitlements they need, or the commodities, that's what they're being called in the CEP process, to actually make this a viable project. The risk is high. Tahoe Tree Company, the risk is low. They've already gone through environmental review to do the commercial project there. They've gone through TRPA. The coverages are ascertained and documented. The environmental thresholds are documented. It's a fairly straightforward environmental process, not requiring an extensive EIR for that particular property.
Could you wrap it up, please?
I'm sorry?
Wrap it up, please.
Sure. The parking garage is a cost item that I see as another difficulty with the BBC project. The off-site fleet parking is another difficulty with the BBC project. All these could be mitigated on the Tahoe Tree site because they have 10 acres there. Risk is much less. The score sheet, if you take a chance to look at it, could be going either way. There's some subjective factors in there, and certainly I don't have the backup to how we got to the score sheet, but I think if you analyze any of these, you could see how it could swing the other way quite easily. And those of us who are business people in Tahoe City support the Tahoe City site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Dunsford. I'm a 35-year resident of Eastern Placer County. I had no intention of speaking this morning, so I'm going to ad-lib here for my 2 or 3 minutes. I would like to point out to you that the Tahoe City site is a singular site. It is a singular project. Tahoe City does not have a CEP program. Tahoe City does not have other projects that are in the wings, waiting for an indicator. Kings Beach is just the opposite. It is the potential for a renaissance. In my conversations with Ray James and other members of the county over the years, one of the principal points that was made was that public investment is typically the catalyst for redevelopment. I'm in commercial real estate, and I have been for that 30-odd years. And I can tell you there is a dozen or more projects that are waiting in the wings to look for an indicator, to see an indicator, and to see support for the community. The CCIP is one. The Government Center is another. The Government Center, in my opinion, is integral to the BBC project. Collectively, this is an extraordinary stimulus for reinvestment in Kings Beach. And you perhaps, and the staff level, do not look at the economic benefit of that catalyst and what will materialize down the road through further investment, but I can tell you it is enormous. The benefits will continue for years and years and years. The revenues will continue for years. And I really implore you to look at this as a catalyst, not as a single project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Rockhold, this is Dave Ferrari, 8200 North Lake Boulevard in Kings Beach. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I just want to echo, as someone with a CEP, I really want to echo what Mike Dunsford just said, and really, we really are looking right now in Kings Beach for that catalyst. We're really looking towards this housing project to move forward, the road project to move forward, and in BBLLC in the county center to be there. We don't have as many businesses that have closed in Kings Beach in the last few years because most of our businesses, frankly, have been closing over the years before when the economy was good. We have had very little. Our last new building was built in Kings Beach downtown, I think about 5 years ago, except for the Safeway. I think the one before that was about 20 years ago. So we've had very little happen there. So for all the reasons that this was a compelling reason to put your government center in Kings Beach in the good economic times, when we were the only community that wanted it, those reasons still exist even greater today. And I would urge you to move forward with the resolution and approve it, and hopefully we put something together in Kings Beach and get the area going. Thank you.
Thank you. I will close the last speaker.
Wyatt Ogilvy, Ogilvy Consulting, representation of BBLLC. Again, we'd like to thank all of you supervisors and staff for your diligent effort in the site selection process. It's been lengthy and arduous, but I'm glad we're here today. The Community of Kings Beach, the North Tahoe Business Association, and the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Committee join us in supporting staff's recommendation for a Kings Beach location under BBLC Option 1. Based on the analysis completed by staff and previous deliberation of this board, a Kings Beach location will have the greatest benefit to revitalization, and many folks have expressed that today. Yet the current economic climate in our state and our nation warrant fiscal prudence. Therefore, I would like to address several points related to the project cost. First, the decision before you today. The decision before you today is not a purchase agreement. It is a selection of a preferred site. Specific terms are subject to a definitive master agreement that will be reviewed at a future date by this board. The level of detail. BBLC has gone through arduous lengths of developing full architectural and civil plans that have been gone out to 3 reputable construction companies for bid. Most recently, Flintco Constructive Services, which has completed projects such as the UC Davis Bendavi Institute and the Folsom Public Library. That bid was prepared in November 2008. The true cost today may be more favorable given competition in the construction trades at this time. Redevelopment tax increment, that was touched on by a previous speaker, but it has not been studied nor directly accounted for in this selection process. With a location at the center, not on the edge, but in the very center of a redevelopment area in a blighted commercial core, the BBLLC site will provide a return on the county's investment for decades into the future. Cost of financing. The difference of the cost of this project, I think, is not truly a difference of an addition, $5 to $15 million additional. The BBLC project cost is estimated to be $22.8 million. This is in the middle of the estimated $20.5 and $24.5 million cost range for the Tahoe Tree Company site. The cost per square foot BBLC for the BBLC site provided in the staff summary includes the cost of financing. If one excludes financing, which I think to an extent is appropriate given the time value of money, the price per square foot is $950. Again, the cost is within the estimated range for the Tahoe Tree Company site. Should the additional cost of financing be a concern, an early buyout clause could be negotiated under the master agreement. A lease purchase appears to be the fiscally prudent decision by providing flexibility to the county and maintaining capital reserves. Risk, I'll touch briefly on risk, and that there's been a lot of discussion of the CEP and risk. We heard that when we were here last up in North Star to discuss this item, and our project team has been evaluating a means by which the remainder of the site could be done under a master plan, and the first phase of the government center could happen as a standalone without code changes or requirements under TRPA, special provisions, and commodities. So in closing, your support of staff's recommendation will create synergy between the forthcoming commercial core improvement project and a new government center to spur a renaissance in Kings Beach. Stephen Brown or myself would be happy to address any questions you may have either at this time or during your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. This is item E.
I'd like to start, and really what I'd kind of like to do is go through some of the comments that people raised and address them, because I've obviously given a lot of thought to this and had a lot of input from folks from the West Shore and the Tahoe City area, a lot of folks from the North Shore, including people in the Martis Valley, folks at North Star. First and foremost, I want to say that the decision that we make here today, as Wyatt pointed out, is, let me find exactly what he said, because it was, is not a purchase agreement. This is a selection of the site. There's a lot of things that could happen between now and down the line. But I view this in the larger sense as how is it going to positively affect the entire area of eastern Placer County. This is not a question from my perspective of is it going to go in Tahoe City or is it going to go in Kings Beach, but what is going to benefit the community of eastern Placer County. And I really want to stress that because I am often frustrated by the fact that we are very balkanized up here. And I say that as a resident of Serene Lakes, which means I don't live in Soda Springs, darn it. And I see very often that same sort of thought process on the lake, at Squaw Valley, in Alpine Meadows. And so I have really had to grapple with what is best long-term for the county. Because while this affects the eastern county most specifically, it's a decision that the rest of my supervisors are going to have to make with me. It affects the whole county. It affects our facilities planning long-term, quite potentially. It affects, just after this morning's budget news, it affects everything to some extent across the county. My biggest piece in making this decision is the long-term revitalization of the eastern county. One of the things that I thought about was something that both Justin brought up and something that Wyatt brought up, which was the question about downtown and centers. And one of the drawbacks that I see to the Tahoe Tree site is it's really not in the downtown. It is in a satellite area that has some businesses that are walkable to it, but I don't see it as having the same potential, the same opportunities as downtown Kings Beach. Stephen's project is really, truly in the downtown core. It's a downtown core that we as a county have made a commitment to revitalize through the Kings Beach Commercial Core Improvement Project. And so that was something I really considered. How will the revitalization occur? How will people utilize the Tahoe Government Center? Will it be in an area that people really can get out and walk and shop and have meals and take the bus or drive their car or get on their bike to get there? So that was something I thought quite a lot about. A couple of folks made the point that, you know, the Kings Beach site would leverage some existing and proposed projects, redevelopment projects, new development projects. I think that matters. I think long-term, economically, whether it's through economic development or economic redevelopment, the Kings Beach site, I think, has a greater upside for economic development and revenue back to the county, back to the lake as a whole, and back to individual business owners. The question of, oops, sorry, smacked my microphone. The question of expansion was brought up. You know, quite honestly, Gary Davis brought up the fact that there's 90,000 square feet of vacant floor space in Tahoe City. There's a ton of vacant floor space in Kings Beach as well. I have had people say to me, why are we building a government center anywhere at this point? There's all this vacant space available. That's a valid question. It's a question that I thought about, and I want to go on record as saying, while we've talked about choosing the Kings Beach as our primary site, with a potential option backed up by the Tahoe Tree, there are other options out there. There are vacant businesses in Tahoe City and Kings Beach that the county could conceivably look at. Additionally, the county, through our redevelopment agency, owns a number of properties that we could develop on our own for a government site. We own some properties in Tahoe City. We own some properties in Kings Beach, which takes me back to, again, to what Wyatt had to say. This is not a purchase agreement that we're entering into today. This is a first step, as Jim pointed out, in a process that's going to move us forward in ultimately having a government center. I'm not going to expound forever. I could, but I'm not going to. I also want to address the concern about loss of jobs. We're not going to be losing any jobs. At the worst, from people's perspective, we'll be locating jobs from one community to another. They'll still remain within the basin. They'll still be shopping here. They'll still be eating meals here. They'll still be buying gas here. These folks aren't going away. They will remain in the basin. They will still be your neighbors. They will still be your business friends and associates. And so that really didn't, that wasn't a huge concern of mine. I'm not concerned that we're losing people or business. So I'm just going to wrap up by really echoing what Mike Dunsford had to say. I think Kings Beach has a great potential for a renaissance. I think that's a fabulous word. It means a rebirth. And I don't know where the rest of my board is going to go with this, but I will be in support of the recommendation.
I'm in support of staff recommendation also. Just in a nutshell, I think the board tried and I think did a good job of trying to compare all the strengths and weaknesses of all of the prospective sites from the beginning, but I think the tipping of the decision for me is clearly the tremendous redevelopment opportunity in Kings Beach. And you know, we've been around so long now that I've been able to enjoy a lot of that in Tahoe City as well with the downtown improvements project, and those things take a huge amount of effort and require tremendous coordination and support from the community, and I guess I think it's time for that to happen in Kings Beach.
First of all, I want to thank Jim Durfee and Mary Dietrich and Lauren Morris for the tremendous amount of work that they've done bringing this forward. Spent a lot of time going over all the options with us. And I can't add anything more to my eloquent colleague here is what she said about the revitalization and the tremendous opportunities for the Kings Beach and the whole Tahoe area. So I'm going to support staff's recommendation as well.
Yeah, I'd actually prefer that we get a motion on the floor and then under a motion under discussion.
Make a motion.
I would defer.
Move to support staff recommendation on site selection for the government center. Confirm the BB LLC option 1 in Kings Beach is the top-ranked site. Authorize the Director of Facility Services to negotiate a master agreement and direct staff to return to the board for approval of the agreement upon completion of negotiations.
Do I have to second that?
You don't have to, but you did. Comments?
Just under discussion, Jim, Lori, I saw Mary here this morning. I don't see her here right now, unless she's sitting there. She is there. Thank you guys for an awful lot of work. I appreciate Mary and Lori the opportunity to meet with you and discuss as this has gone on. And I think the ranking, the criteria that you guys put together accurately reflected the priority of this board as expressed not only in public hearings but also in private meetings. The opportunity to infuse some public dollars, partner with private sector risk capital to rebuild a community that once deservedly had the moniker of Kings Beach, and today, unfortunately, is a bit more of a pauper's beach. Hopefully we can help turn that around with this investment. Having said that, I think we all recognize the risk associated with working with TRPA through the CEP process. And so what I would ask is, if we move forward with this, we essentially now have a dog in the fight. And I would ask Jennifer to work with the CEO's office, and perhaps Mr. Caldwell might be the appropriate person given his familiarity with TRPA and some of the personalities. I'd like us to develop a true lobbying strategy to go find the votes on TRPA to bust this through staff and get this project moving. Let's put together an affirmative, aggressive lobbying program to go line up the votes to move this project forward. It's now our project with this action. We are saying we're prepared to make a commitment in this area, so let's put some resources behind that and get this thing moving.
We could use the sheriff's SWAT team.
And Kirk, just so you know, the TRPA actually, tomorrow, we're going to be taking a walking tour. The governing board and all the community, of course, is welcome. We're going to be doing a walking tour of Kings Beach, which I think is a first great step toward making the needs on the North Shore known to the governing board. So I would be happy to follow up on your suggestion. Thank you.
I'm talking about a good old-fashioned count the noses kind of a thing where we sit down and look at who gets to cast a vote, where are they, and what can we do to move them in our direction.
Well, I probably can't count the noses.
No, I know. That's why
That
I
would
was
be a
saying that
brown
perhaps our staff ought to be involved in this, because we are making an investment in this community. We by virtue of this vote, we're demonstrating that we are willing to take leadership in moving something forward here that is important to us economically, socially, and so if we're going to put our dollars behind it, let's put a little bit of sweat equity into that part of the process as well.
We have a motion and a second. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Let's take item number F.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. As a follow-up to action that your board just took, we are also recommending, as I mentioned earlier, that you authorize us to enter into negotiations with the Tahoe Tree Company owners, the Heishes, for an option on that property, again, as a backstop in the event that we bust up against a fatal flaw in the BBLLC project. I think this will, secure our ability to come out of this one way or the other with a good spot for our future. So without further elaboration, I would make that recommendation.
It's not a public hearing, however, if there are any members of the public that would wish to comment on this item. Seeing none, bring it back to the board for action. Motion by Supervisor Montgomery, second by Supervisor Holmes. Sorry. To approve the item. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you very much.
And very, very quickly, I wanted to thank your board for the support through this process. Once again, thank Lori for just a huge amount of effort, and the property owners that we dealt with. But very importantly, I wanted to thank all of the communities. We had an enormous amount of input from the communities. They were very participative in this process, and all of that participation was very helpful. So thank you all.
Let's jump back to our 10:15 time item. No, we did our 10 o'clock. We did our 10 o'clock. County Council will keep up with the board, and we'll move right along. Yeah. 10:15 item is Cedra item, a zoning text amendment regarding residential density bonuses, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Mr. Euler. As the board is aware, the state of California certified the county's housing element as being consistent with state law, and included within that housing element are a variety of programs and policies that will allow the county to address its housing needs. This proposed zoning text amendment is one of those programs that's identified in the housing element that will allow the county to further its regional commitment towards housing in the area. Today's presentation will be made by Jennifer Dzakowicz.
Good morning and thank you. I'm here to talk a little bit about residential density bonuses with you and our existing ordinance. And I wanted to walk through, this is an existing ordinance that we're proposing to modify. And before we get into describing what the modification is, I was asked to give a little bit of background on what the existing ordinance does. And the purpose of the ordinance, of course, complies with state laws regarding density bonuses for building affordable housing. And in order to be eligible to get this, to be entitled to the provisions under this ordinance, you have to do a couple of things. And here we have listed, build a low or very low income household, provide about 10%, 5 to 10%, and that would be on a project that's 5 or more units, as well as the same provisions for senior citizen housing developments and or condominium or plan developments. The condominium and plan developments, of course, address the moderate income levels. And again, here we're talking about existing ordinance. And some questions came up as we walked through this process to really understand and get in the definitions of what's low, what's very low, what's moderate. Low, 50% of the median income of Placer County. Very low, 50%, low, 80% of the median income of Placer County, and moderate is 120%. So adding those definitions in there. And of course, then the next question is, a lot of people ask, what is our median income? And we're at $72,800 for a household of 4. There's a scale, and it's all based on households. So looking at how this ordinance works today under its current provisions, if you come in and develop a low-income project with approximately 10% or 10% of the units being affordable, and we're talking in this example kind of these charts. This chart deals with low, the amounts of low provided, and then the density bonus you're entitled to. And this side we get into very low. Again, either 10% or 5%, you're entitled to a 20% density bonus. And that means 20% above what you would have been allowed under the existing ordinance. However, our existing ordinance caps you at a total of 35%, or excuse me, individually 35%, and a cumulative total of 50%. And I just wanted to walk through a quick example. Again, if you're looking at a property that's zoned and would allow 15 units for the acre, you could propose developing 75 units on 5 acres. And here's the numbers, how they would work out. If you did, and again, this is strictly just an example, moderate, the units, and low and very low. Providing the very low and low income, you would be entitled to an additional 27 units, giving you a total, I need my pointer, of 54 units. Again, but under the existing ordinance, you're currently capped, and you would only be allowed 38 of those units, not the entire 54 units, the way our ordinance is written. So what we're proposing today is to look at a potential change. And the change would allow for, at the planning director's discretion, for a project to come in and request a density bonus beyond that cumulative 50% and up to a total of 100% on a project site. And that would be the planning director taking to considerations on a project-by-project basis. And as you all, of course, are aware, planning director's discretion is appealable, so if somebody wanted to appeal that decision, it would go to the planning commission and potentially could come to your board. We're looking at also limiting this to the Lake Tahoe Basin, in particular the redevelopment area. And here this exhibit shows the existing redevelopment areas. We have a small area called the Gateway, of course, Tahoe City, Tahoe Vista, and Kings Beach. So we're really looking at a specific location we would allow the potential increases. So how would this change our numbers? The numbers would, again, for low and very low, in order for somebody to get total 100%, they would have to come in with a project that provided 64% of the units. That would be low, and 37% very low. That would be significant amounts of affordable housing being provided. And again, I didn't put the chart in here, but for the moderate, in order to achieve 100% affordability, you'd have to get approximately, or you would actually provide 100% affordability to get a 95% density bonus increase. Under the existing ordinance, you couldn't get a 100% under a moderate income scenario. You'd only be able to achieve a 95%. I feel like I'm going kind of fast here. So back to our example that we just looked at. Again, same property, 15 units per acre. Somebody's coming in developing 75 units. They get all 4 of those 54 units. There wouldn't be no cap. So basically that's how it changes our example. And kind of getting back into, Michael touched on this a little bit, of why are we talking about creating incentives for affordable housing? Well, first and foremost, we just adopted our housing element, and it was just accepted by the state. And we had policies in there that encouraged us to, in particular, work with CRPA, which is what policy C1 talks about, in order to provide incentives for more affordable housing projects. I didn't really talk on it, but the original density bonus ordinance required by the state was adopted in this county in 1996 and then was updated in 2006. There hasn't been one project in Tahoe since 1996 that has even utilized the existing ordinance. So we feel that this is a next step to maybe providing that incentive to somebody to come in and utilize an existing ordinance. And again, even countywide, since the 2006 update, there hasn't been a project that's really come in and asked to utilize the existing ordinance. So we really see this as a potential to incentivize affordable housing. Also, the Domus project in Kings Beach, 3 out of the 5 projects that Domus is proposing would be looking at utilizing this above the 50% rule. And so we feel that here we have a project that is looking at basically 100% affordability, and is there a way we can provide incentives to help them achieve their goals? And we feel this is an excellent opportunity to look at adjusting our ordinance to create an incentive. So with that, I would like to
add a comment. I think really when you say affordable housing in this basin, really what we're talking about is workforce housing. People that actually do a lot of the work in these communities and have the ability for them to have a place to live, you know, above what some of the standards are in Kings Beach today, for example. So, you know, we talk about affordable housing, and it's kind of got a negative connotation. People think, wow, you know, what are you building here? And the reality is, I think for this area, it's going to be workforce housing.
Yeah, and I would echo that, and is when you start looking at the median income, and then you start looking at some of these jobs that potential people might have a job that provides a significant income, or what I would consider pays well, but they don't even meet the affordability, you know, they don't even meet the median income. So, yeah.
Kurt?
Could you please go back to the slide that shows the percentages as you're proposing? There you go. Thank you. So if we could, if you just kind of help me walk through this a little bit. Using an example of, for round numbers, of a project. I have a project today. Existing density today allows me 100 units. Okay. Help me understand, for instance, on the very low income side, are you saying if I designate 37 of those units, 37% of my project, 37 of those units for very low income purposes, I get a 100% density bonus? Is it on the remainder or on my original 100 units?
It's on the original 100 units.
So now, by providing 37 very low income units, I have then 163 market rate units that would be available?
Well, I'm not going to verify your math. I'm assuming you did the math correctly. But yes, those units would be a market rate.
Okay.
They only have to provide the original 37 units.
So it's
That would
37
be
of the
very
original, it's
low.
not 37 of the bonus density.
Correct.
So the 37 doesn't double.
Yes. And
So
again,
now I have 163 market rate units that are available if I'm providing 37 very low income.
and getting, stepping back into the whole provisions of what the density bonus incentive is providing, it's providing for, if you provide units, we're going to give you above and beyond market rate units with the economic benefit of you'll have more units, so we're subsidizing.
No,
some
I
of the
understand that.
units.
I certainly understand the reason behind it. I just want to make sure that
That
from
is
a
what-
math standpoint, it's I think a fairly healthy incentive.
Correct.
Next question. Can I provide those 37 affordable housing units off-site? Does it have to be contiguous with my project, or can I go either acquire a piece of property to build those 37 units, or partner with somebody that already owns a piece of property and place those 37 units on that, or does it have to be incorporated within my existing or my opportunity for 163 market rate units?
And I hope I don't misspeak, but I'm going to, and I see Tony jumping up, but
Ordinance allows only this opportunity to occur in very limited areas if you require, look at the map. So,
Right, no, within the redevelopment areas, but
And-
within that Kings Beach corridor area that was outlined, there are certainly opportunities for market rate development as well as affordable housing development. And I'm just wondering, from can somebody come in? They control two separate parcels, and they want to place the affordable housing units on one of the parcels and build just market rate on the other.
And
I think that can only happen if they were to process both parcels and both applications simultaneously in the same project.
That's correct. The intent of the ordinance is that the density would occur on the project site. The intent is not to allow for it to be transferred off to other sites. There are mechanisms that allow for the transfer of density, but the provisions of this ordinance are to occur on the project site itself.
Okay, thank you.
And I also want to state that there is a provision for when a developer chooses to donate land that's separate than what we're looking at here. So the intent here, again, Michael's saying,
Right.
on-site units. If you're going to do something like we're going to build the market rate units and then we're going to donate a piece of land over here, the rules change under our own existing ordinance.
I think that's a very good point, because I think having the units together makes it a better overall project. I mean, I've seen a lot of that, especially in Roseville, and you really can't, unless I go show you the actual units, you can't tell which ones are which. And I think that makes a good thing. I think it makes a positive statement for any type of building that's going to occur. Jennifer, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Jennifer's not done, and we've all started chiming in here. I'd also like to just respond, Kirk, to your concern that these density bonuses really are at the discretion of the planning director, you know, so they're not by right. And so, you know, a good, smart, intelligent, funny, handsome planning director.
Where can we find one?
Yeah. You know, is obviously going to be looking to make sure that developers don't come in with that intent to get around the intent of our
That's
resolution.
why, I guess that's why I was just asking for that clarification then. Thank you.
Great presentation. Anyone, I mean, do we want to bring it back to the board now, or have anybody in the audience want to comment on this proposed change?
Developer, San Francisco. We're building the Kings Beach Housing Now project. What's passing around to you right now is a bit of an overview of the project to kind of put it in context. One, the density bonus is really limited to the Tahoe redevelopment areas. As we all know, part of that is governed by TRPA. There's many things that have to play here in balance. This is not just a big open the floodgates and everyone run in and they're going to do massive redevelopment and it's going to Manhattanize Kings Beach. That's not going to happen. As we all know, the lake region here is incredibly sensitive. There is tremendous regulatory restrictions around coverage, the amount of open space, the amount of BMPs that you need to put into place. So part of the challenge is to balance all of these things. So part of the solution then is smart growth. Part of the solution is thinking about how do we live, how can we put housing near transit, how can we build within the existing constraints of TRPA, get a lot of units in, but do it in such a way that it balances the social, economic, and environmental benefits. And so what we've been able to do is take very small sites, and again, we're talking Tahoe that has very limited sites. Part of the restrictions is that you can't build on 10 acres at a time and spread it all out nicely that we'd like to see. You actually have to densify. But that's not a scary thing, and I think you can kind of look at the pictures here. These are not, affordable housing tends to be smaller apartments. 600 square feet or less for a one-bedroom apartment, 1,000, 1,200 square feet for a three-bedroom apartment. They're very compact, yet incredibly spacious compared to where people in Kings Beach currently live. On average, most of the apartments in Kings Beach are less than 200 square feet because they're converted motel rooms. And again, I just want to remind folks, we did a housing survey back in 2007, which really called for the incredible need for affordable housing in Kings Beach. And just some of the notes is that in Kings Beach, the average household that was surveyed in 2007 was nearly 5 people. And 75% of all the people surveyed live in studios or one-bedrooms. So it really means that the current housing stock is failing. It was never really intended to be permanent workforce housing. The solution here now is a new kind of smart growth where we can bring in affordable housing that is appropriately dense, that works within TRPA coverage, height, and we've managed to do this. And I wanted to also state that our project in its current stand will be the guinea pig for this density bonus, and it will be an exciting, I think, progressive movement towards balancing housing and the environment for Lake Tahoe. It will also, it's currently gone through its CEQA. The county has approved it from an environmental standpoint. We had a wonderful meeting last month at NITRAC. NITRAC members all endorse this 100%. This is a project that really does balance many, many variables, but allows for, I think, success in terms of reaching the goals of redevelopment for Kings Beach. So I'm here for any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you.
Good morning, supervisors. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is John Falk. I'm the legislative advocate representing the Tahoe Sierra Board of Realtors, and I come to the podium today to actually speak in support, in great support of the proposed amendment that would be effective in the Tahoe region. It is, in point of fact, more than necessary. It's, from our perspective, it's a good first, a good first thing, a good starting point. The challenges to development in the Tahoe Basin have been articulated well by the past speaker. There are many. The expenses are extraordinary, and housing affordability suffers because of it. Anything that you can do to facilitate additional housing opportunities is most definitely to all of our benefits. And to that end, looking at a way that you're not just meeting the minimum density bonus as required by law, but you're going above and beyond. You're seeking, as you should, to find new, creative, innovative ways to incentivize people to really make that compelling situation where they would be foolish not to proceed with a project that included affordable housing. So to these ends, this entire concept is to be applauded. The one point that I would bring up just as a matter of possible consideration was actually raised by Supervisor Euler's question regarding on-site versus off-site. And that is that, again, given the extraordinary constraints on construction, where it can occur, how much can occur at any given location, I would urge you to continue down that same path of flexibility and going above and beyond, and in doing so, saying that you may have a preference for on-site construction of the affordable units, but that you would be equally, or at least, if not equally, at least amenable to allowing people to take full advantage of this ordinance if it were to require, if they could demonstrate that it's preferable or required to break it up into two sites. Anything that puts housing on the ground rather than just on paper is for the good. Thank you.
Agree with you 100%.
Ellie Waller, Tahoe Vista resident. I'm here today on behalf of many North Shore citizens who are unable to attend. Their comments have been incorporated here. We're not questioning the existing affordable housing is in need of dire improvement, but some questions do come to mind. We don't understand why a density increase of this magnitude to existing zoning regulations, which have been in place for 40 years, are left up to the discretion of the planning director and his staff without a public workshop, not just public comment. The debate isn't about the percentage, it's about the process. Why would this zoning increase being proposed by the county come before the regional plan update when it should be in concert with, and we're not sure where that process is going yet? If 1,000 people are potentially affected by this decision, which was stated in the staff summary, why didn't the county notice those 1,000 people by direct mailing? Most people don't know the Auburn Journal exists, and most don't read the Sierra Sun. This decision could impact them, and in order to achieve any kind of meaningful conversation or a truly transparent and open process, the community should be included. Many of the concerns the county as well as TRPA have heard from the local North Shore community center on the potential impacts of community character, cumulative impacts, the lack of adequate infrastructure. TRPA, with the assistance from Placer and other counties, will be updating the community plans in depth with environmental studies. Hopefully the communities will soon be sitting down with the planners, the project proponents, and other agencies to truly customize these neighborhoods. The North Shore communities are not cookie cutter. Kings Beach is not like Tahoe Vista. Tahoe Vista is not like Carnelian Bay. Carnelian Bay is not like Tahoe City. It goes on. We understand grant funding has a flavor of the month, but urban and rural are not interchangeable. A public process used for making any decision on bonus density and similar changes that could reflect the regional plan update should include the planning director's staff, as well as business owners, project proponents, affected property owners, citizens, as well as utility districts, Department of Public Work, and other agencies that will be addressing infrastructure needs. Will the following assessments be made? A survey of existing conditions, whether site is currently developed or not, true cumulative impacts, not myopically done one project at a time, an updated markets need, consideration of all communities having a fair share of affordable housing, and looking at communities where affordable isn't planned, like Lake Forest and Tahoe City, or even secondary units like mother-in-law units, housing above garages, which have been studied that would be low-impact solutions to the affordable needs. In conclusion, the decision before you today must be considered carefully. The public kept informed, the process open, and the proper level of environmental review and documentation. We are all in favor of affordable housing, but as potential neighbors of an affordable project, we want some rational input to the process of determining location, number of units, design density, and massing. Thank you.
Ron McIntyre. I am a board member of the defunct organization called WAD, which still exists and has a few resources, but mainly what I'd like to speak to is in favor of the position that's been put forward by the staff. And having said that, I'd just like to move directly to what Supervisor Rockholm said regarding workforce housing. That's the key to our existence up here, and it's not being addressed by TRPA. So what I'd like to conclude with here is your newfound lobbying capability with TRPA, use it to facilitate workforce housing. Thank you.
George Coster again, Kings Beach. I just want to point out, I'm sure you've read, because we love studies. I think it's study number 25. I lost track, but you had a study done in May 14th of 2007 by Economics and Planning Systems and their recommendation, and they do a whole section on density. So just to refresh everybody's memory, because I know we have copious amounts of time to read more studies, density historically has been considered as a negative concept in the Lake Tahoe Basin, and particularly along the North Shore. However, the vitality of both Kings Beach and Tahoe City has suffered in large part because of the lack of density at the commercial cores and the suburbanization of the surrounding residential communities. The result is that much more land is covered than is necessary for communities of this size, and uses are spread out such that pedestrian activity is difficult and increased auto activity is the unintended consequence. In a sprawling development pattern, as exists in both communities, much more land is covered than necessary because of the amount of roadway, surface parking, and building footprint area that is necessary. The unintended consequences of the current TRPA regulations encourage landowners to demonstrate as much physical coverage as the land is possible to enhance its value. So again, it gets back to the whole point about in our place-based planning that you supported, which is now almost 2.5, 3 years ago, there was a big support for smart growth, and we talked about smart growth earlier in the Kings Beach Town Center with Mr. Brown's project. It's the same elements again. So we need to basically increase our density and also maximize the use of our land for both housing and retail and commercial activities. So I urge you to vote to approve the amendment for the residential bonus and to enable our communities to revitalize our built environment, as well as to enable Placer County to meet your housing element requirements. Thanks.
Rich Colwell from Placer County Redevelopment Agency. I'd like to make your board aware that the Redevelopment Agency is very supportive of this work by the Planning Department. This is one step in many steps that we are taking to try to attempt to revitalize Kings Beach. Your board has been involved in this process for the last 7 to 10 years. We are at a tipping point here with the projects that we're trying to move through the county and also through the TRPA board. So we would ask your approval of this from the agency staff. Thank you.
Good morning again. Carol Savory, Board President of the North Tahoe Business Association, speaking on the organization's behalf today. We encourage you to support the request of the Planning Department. We as an organization support putting affordable workforce housing in our community. It's good for our businesses. It's good for the business owners and employees to be able to afford to live in a place where they work. Today, many of them commute not only out of Placer County, but out of state from Reno and Carson City. Another point I'd like to make is that housing density, that human density, really exists today as demonstrated in that 2007 housing survey. It exists in terms of the number of people living on these sites. We just don't have the safe, dignified building structures to support those numbers today. So we encourage you to do that. Lastly, I would like to also make a point on affordable workforce housing in that it is targeted to incomes of that area where people are paying a rent or a purchase price, if that's appropriate, of 30% of their income, which leaves those people with more disposable income to spend at our local businesses as they live in our area. So it's good for our economy overall. So we urge you to support it. Thank you.
I will close the hearing and bring it back to the board. Yes.
Perhaps, Tony, this question's for you. I'm assuming that if this is discretionary, at the planning director's discretion, that decision by the planning director to approve the density increase would have to happen relatively early in the project planning process.
Yes.
Okay.
Anticipate the same.
So, how does that decision get noticed? How, if you're contemplating a density increase and you decide, okay, we're going to approve it for this particular project, how does that decision get noticed within the community affected? And then should somebody choose to appeal for any of the reasons, for instance, that Ms. Waller listed, what is the appeal process for that decision?
Staff would take this as any other project that comes before the Planning Commission for consideration. We would bring it to the local planning agencies, in this case NITRAC, for their review and consideration prior to any decision by the planning director. The decision of the planning director would be made known at that public meeting should anyone choose to oppose or appeal that decision. They would have the ability to do so. It's my understanding, and Mr. LaBeouf can clarify me, that decisions of the planning director may be appealed up to the planning commission, and those decisions may be appealed up to your board.
In reality, if there's an early decision during the pre-application process or at the application process, and the decision by the planning director is made, the only person who noticeably would appeal immediately would probably be the property owner or the applicant if they didn't want to go down this path without some sort of intervention from a review. Otherwise, it's going to go right through the process and be discussed publicly through the various MAC hearings. It's going to go to the Planning Commission. It would be fully vetted at the Planning Commission. It would be fully documented in the environmental documentation for the project. And it could fail at that point if somebody convinces the Planning Commissions or perhaps the Board of Supervisors that that density is not appropriate given the risks or the perceived environmental consequences or other issues. We do not separately notice discretionary decisions of the planning director. He does it a lot of them every day.
Make a motion?
To amend section 17.54.120C of the Placer County zoning ordinance to allow residential density bonuses as described in our Board of Supervisors packet.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now, we're going to do the 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Mr. Clark.
Mr. Chair, what you have before you today is a proposed zoning text amendment related to the storage of snowage removal equipment. This is a zoning text amendment the staff has been working on for over the past year. I have to tell you, in my personal experience, I can't remember a zoning text amendment that had as much public review and input and involvement in the process as this one has done. But it's respectful of the concerns of the community. There are two issues that need to be addressed out here. And as I believe you will find in Mr. Clark's presentation, that the issues and concerns of the community have been taken into consideration, and a proposal is set forth that allows for a balance for all parties concerned. Today's presentation will be made by Lauren Clark of the Planning Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It is a pleasure to bring this back to the board. It has been through quite a process, even dating back to 2007 and even dating further back in time with those individuals who've had to deal with this issue as part of code enforcement. So it has quite a history in Placer County, but more recently we think it is relevant and it is timely to address this issue because the amount of code enforcement activity has simply increased. So there's a trend towards needing to see resolution, and what we have with the ordinance today, we believe, is compromise language that has come out of a community deliberation process as well as our own staff recommendations. And what we're considering today is whether or not certain types of heavy equipment can be stored on residential property, and if so, how is that regulated in the Placer County zoning ordinance. And what we've presented to the board today is a new section of County Code, section 17.56.235, which would accommodate exactly that. Presently, the current zoning ordinance really is intentionally limiting on the amount and type of heavy equipment that can be stored on your property. There is one provision in County Code where you can, if you have a 10,000 square foot parcel and you have a garage, you can actually apply for a minor use permit, come before the zoning administrator, and make an argument, make a case as to why one piece of heavy equipment could be stored on your property anywhere in Placer County, as long as it could be placed inside of a garage and meet the conditions of that particular use permit. But it does have two key standards, 10,000 square feet or greater in area, and you have to have a garage. What we find in Tahoe is many parcels are smaller than 10,000 square feet. In many areas, we do not have garages. So as I mentioned, we've seen quite a flurry of code enforcement activity. There were 6 or 8 cases last year. It even resulted in some Channel 3 time with the NBC looking into this particular issue, even as it related to the status of this particular procedure. There was a proposal made in September of 2007. It's found on page 20 of your board package. That was staff's original attempt at trying to provide a simple solution to the problem, which would have been a modification to the home occupation standard of the code, which in turn would allow somebody under that provision of the code to run a home occupation type business that would include the one vehicle. That was actually presented to the Planning Commission, and based upon testimony from parties at that hearing, the Commission sent it back to staff to bring back something more comprehensive, but also with greater public participation. And today's product is really what you have as a result of those subsequent conversations. So generally speaking, and obviously it's appropriate to limit heavy equipment in commercial and industrial zone districts. Many sections of county code allow contractors' yards and other locations where these vehicles are stored and maintained. What we find in the Tahoe Basin is that simply doesn't work. During snow events, it's very difficult to get those vehicles into the neighborhoods, that the county's own plowing activities do not remove driveways, do not remove the berm at the driveways, and oftentimes that activity needs to occur 2, 3, even 4 times during a snow event over a 24-hour period. So we plow the big roads, we try to do a good job with that. The smaller operators are trying to get everybody to and from work and in and out of their driveways, and we have conflict because the majority of the operators are not storing their equipment at commercial and industrial sites because they are very limited above 5,000 feet in elevation in terms of their distribution. So they're being stored at the neighborhood scale so they can be immediately responsive to their client base and get people to and from work and school and wherever else they have to go. So the new section of the code, this 1756-250, tries to account for, not 250, that's the old code, this new section, tries to account for seasonal storage at the residential neighborhood level, at a home, subject to a whole series of restrictions. The primary restriction that we're dealing with, I'll come back to this in the findings and the staff recommendations. The primary restriction that we're dealing with is that it's a seasonal type of storage. It doesn't take away the other opportunity that's still in the code if you have 10,000 square feet and a garage. So that still stands. This is if you can't meet the criteria of the current code, you have a smaller parcel, you don't have a garage, you're going to be allowed, if you get the appropriate approvals, seasonal storage from November 1 to April 30th, the snow season of the year. That's the primary standard that comes with this code. Then there's a whole series of standards, and there's a rather lengthy matrix in the back of the code that deals with all of the issues about having that vehicle on your property. Obviously, the primary issue at the neighborhood scale as it relates to land use concerns is compatibility with the neighborhood. Can you store a heavy piece of equipment that is designed to remove snow in the winter, might be designed to remove dirt, soil, rock in the summer? Can you have that piece of equipment next door to you and hopefully not have a problem of incompatibility? So you have a whole range of standards. Obviously, this is geared towards snow country, 5,000 feet in elevation and above. There was a lengthy discussion at both the Commission, at the Squaw Valley MAC, and at NITRAC about how large can the vehicle be. The Planning Commission has recommended a standard of 8 feet in height as a maximum. Fuel storage limitations. Is it 5 gallons of fuel? Is it 500 gallons of fuel? There's a lot of places within county code where we address this issue. That's been folded in. How much maintenance are you allowed to do? What hours of the day? How much noise can that maintenance activity generate? We felt it was appropriate for exemptions for major snow events. You can actually bring a second vehicle on the property when we know a major snow event is occurring. So this was a concern of many that one vehicle is not doing it. Oftentimes it takes a second vehicle. So this allows that temporary storage, bringing that vehicle in before the snow event and then removing it after the snow event. A requirement that the home that this vehicle be stored on be occupied. In other words, that we don't allow seasonal housing to be really serving a place as an office or a garage for maintenance. You need to live there. Limitations on the storage of accessory equipment, definitions, new definitions within the code, And then, as I mentioned, this matrix that deals with setbacks, the size, the location, the square footage, the type of zone district, et cetera. As Michael mentioned, there's been a considerable amount of public discussion. I won't recite, I believe it's in the staff report, all of the meetings, but it did result in 2 final deliberations by the Squaw Valley MAC and by NITRAC. In May, Squaw Valley MAC voted 4-2. This was really the conclusion of probably 4 or 5 meetings with the Squaw Valley MAC on this issue. In the end, many were concerned that we weren't necessarily solving the problem that the current ordinance didn't already provide the opportunity for. If you could meet that standard, you could get a use permit, you could store your vehicle year-round, let the current standard lie. The majority went with a provision of the code similar to what has been presented to you today, because the Planning Commission did make modification. Secondly, the North Tahoe NITRAC considered this after the Planning Commission's deliberations. So just the way schedules work, the Commission heard it in the morning up here in Tahoe, NITRAC heard it that night. And NITRAC had some concerns about the Commission's deliberations, which resulted in 3 areas of disagreement. One is, and we'll talk about it in a second, there's a provision within this, I believe it's number 15, that allows for a single operator to have multiple pieces of equipment considered under one use permit. So I have my home, I have my business, it might be home occupation, I might have my one vehicle. I run 4 pieces of equipment total. I have 3 other sites. I need to cite or locate those 3 pieces of equipment. The way the code is written, you apply for one use permit for multiple locations, as opposed to 4 use permits. The Commission's deliberations resulted in basically an unlimited number. One use permit can account for an unlimited number. The original recommendation from staff was a maximum of 3 under one use permit. Secondly, and this resulted in also a very lengthy deliberation, was how large can this piece of equipment be? The final standard that the Commission landed on was a height limit, 8 feet height max. The original recommendation had a length, width, and horsepower limitation. Considerable dialogue within the community, within the NITRAC. Planning Commission believed that the height limitation alone was satisfactory. If a vehicle is 121 horsepower versus 119, does it make a fundamental difference? It's sort of the conclusion of where they were at. And then lastly, because of the seasonal nature of housing in Tahoe, where many of these homes are not lived in year-round or not lived in full-time during the winter months, the Commission was concerned about the full-time occupancy standards, so they backed away from that with their deliberations. This is a similar summary. So you can see the Commission shifting from 7 feet to 8 feet, and then the deletion of the other standards. 2, the language for residential occupancy now reads during some portion. So it's a rather liberal interpretation of what that could be. It could be 1 day during the snow season as opposed to a full-time occupancy standard. This condition or standard number 15 as it relates to the multiple locations. And then lastly, the Commission, while they relaxed the standard on height and horsepower and length and width, they also did believe that residential properties greater than 20,000 square feet should have an off-street parking standard that is simply outdoors or screened to one that is enclosed. So they're trying to move the vehicles indoors was the intent of the Commission. So in the end, there's a whole long list of recommendations in your staff report. I believe they are on page 24. This is just a summary of those actions. Actually, on page 24, what you find, which is different than what's on the screen, is all of the findings are embedded in each one of those actions. But in the end, what we're doing is considering the approval of a mitigated neg deck. So we went through a process of evaluating the environmental effects of this project, and that negative declaration is included in your package. We also have 2 sets of ordinances. One is a zoning text amendment as recommended by the Commission that introduces this new county code section, 1756-235, for snow removal equipment storage or residential snow removal equipment storage. We modified the definitions section of county code. We modified the table that shows where these uses are allowed and what sort of permits are required. And then lastly, we're also modifying the Squaw Valley General Plan. One is to ensure that it is appropriately cross-referenced to Chapter 17 of the code or the zoning ordinance. but also to do three other things. To make clear in the Squaw Valley General Plan, in the commercial zone districts, that snow removal equipment storage is allowed. So that was something that the Squaw Valley MAC wanted. It is a departure of the balance of the code that is dealing with residential. They just wanted to make very clear that you can park snow removal equipment in the village commercial, entrance commercial, and heavy commercial zone district. So that is also embedded within the ordinance that has been presented to you today. And that concludes staff recommendations. I know there are some folks here in the audience who obviously plan on speaking on this issue, and happy to answer any questions that you might have. Questions?
Jennifer.
I have a couple of clarifying questions that I'd like to start with, Lauren. The maximum vehicle height standard of 8 feet. The Planning Commission, if I recall, and I wasn't there, so this is why I'm asking you, and the Planning Commission, as I recall, felt that the doing away with the length and width standards and allowing it to be 8 feet was sort of, would not really affect the intent of the ordinance, because the equipment, the pieces of equipment would still either have to be garaged or screened depending on the size of the lot. Is that correct?
What the commission believed was the primary objective here was getting the vehicle parked indoors.
Mm-hmm.
And that increasing from 7 to 8 feet seemed to accommodate a particular type of equipment that is being used, but it would also preclude the larger, heavier pieces of equipment that have been part of the complaints that we received through code enforcement. And that if that vehicle at 8 feet can get inside of a garage, that it didn't matter how wide or how long it was or how much horsepower it had.
Because it still had to go in the garage.
It had to get in the garage.
Okay. And then when you talk about larger pieces of equipment, again, my understanding, because I have to thank my predecessor for bringing me into this halfway through the game, my understanding is the concern was not necessarily the size of the equipment in these code enforcement complaints, but the fact that there were often multiple pieces on a single property. Am I right in characterizing it that way?
And you may hear additional testimony, but it was exactly not so much the size, though there is a visual impact associated with smaller versus larger, but it was the vehicle, running the vehicle being maintained, the fueling activities, employees coming to and from the business, odors associated with diesel engines in particular, so a lot of things. And I think the larger the vehicle, the greater the perception of that being incompatible with the neighborhood.
Okay. And then the minor use permit on that, it would be $1,865. Is that correct? I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here.
Fee schedule just in case. That's correct. Under the current fee schedule effective July 1, 2008. So
Okay.
there'll be a modification. I don't know if we made a CPI increase to the ordinance this year.
Okay.
So it's probably that.
And so currently that $1,865 would permit an unlimited number of pieces of equipment?
The way it's currently drafted with the commission's recommendation to you, that's correct.
Okay. So say I'm Jennifer Montgomery, which I happen to be quite handily, and I'm an operator, not an owner, but I drive the piece of equipment. So it's parked in my driveway. The owner of the company for whom I'm plowing or blowing has permitted it from my house because we need to identify where each piece is. I decide that I'm making so much money as a supervisor that I don't want to plow anymore. So my neighbor 2 doors down says, hey, I'd be happy to do that. What is the process for making that change, and at what cost to the owner? Because I know that we want to track where the equipment is, because the intent, if I understand it, is to make sure that we don't have a lot of equipment clustered in, a specific block or a specific neighborhood, but that, the both convenience or inconvenience, depending on how you look at it, of having snow removal equipment parked in your neighborhood is spread out evenly.
And that is a question that had been in the past posed by operators, that many individuals find this business not something they necessarily want to get into the following year after they go through one season of plowing snow. So they oftentimes need to move that piece of equipment with the new employee. So there's been concerns about, okay, does every occasion that I have to do that trigger this $1,865 fee? It's a modification of the use permit. And because it's an unlimited number, we would hope that when you're you're sort of master planning your business model, that you would have the flexibility built in on the front end, so you wouldn't have to modify over time. However, that will occur, and our fee schedule accommodates that. Depending on the level of the modification, we have 1/3 the base fee, 2/3 the base fee. We can build into our fee ordinance what that expectation is. But generally speaking, we need to conduct a public hearing, we need to go through the public notice process, and we need to evaluate the new site or multiple sites that may come with that modification. So whatever those costs that are incurred there is typically the cost that we want to pass through to the applicant.
And that, just to be clear, is for the minor use permit, not for the ARP, because some of these would be just subject to an ARP, from what I understand.
Yes, if you're pursuing the master use permit, that is not the administrative review permit, which is a much less expensive $565 application.
Okay, that's all for now. Thank you.
I will open it up now for anybody in the audience who wishes to comment on this item.
My name is Norm Saylor. Good morning to all of you. That man especially right there, because the reason I'm here is because of Doc and Rocky. They taught me something about snow, that it's not just white.
Believe it or not, I used to shovel.
These are some photographs for you that you can pass amongst yourselves. It'll show you the difference in sizes between what we're talking about. Again, at every meeting, the same thing. What is it? How is it? Whatever. Will it fit in a garage? Will it do this? Will it do that? No. A lot of times they won't, and a lot of the houses do not have a garage. I'm speaking mainly on a place called Serene Lakes. That's where Jennifer lives. I live in Soda Springs and Norton, but without Soda Springs and Norton, Serene Lakes wouldn't exist. So we have a problem. Those of us that live up there have to continue to operate these machines. Each machine can handle approximately 50 driveways under the conditions that exist at Serene Lakes. That's what we have to look at. So to put these numbers down to say how many do you need, so on and so forth, there's roughly 800 homes in there. It takes about 20 machines to run around in that community, when the good people from the county can't always get there and take care of us, because that sometimes happens. Placer County itself parks 5 pieces of big machinery in the community. We're only parking all these little machines in the community. Most of my drivers are all retired people that want something to do. Get me out of the house. Let me have a machine so that I can go to the post office, so on and so forth. We're trying to fix something that totally, truly, is not broke. Here we're going through, poor Lauren, I go along with him, man. He has had nothing but all kinds of people jumping all over him to say, what can we do, what can we do? Your letter, the emails that you've received, out of those, 3 of them came from Alpine Meadows, 1 of them came from Squaw Valley, 42 came from Serene Lakes. That was generated by a letter that Cliff Busby put together, and I did sign it. But most of the people that looked at that did not really understand that it was going through this whole system. They wanted to keep the machines in the community because they knew of the value for it. I asked this board to exempt Serene Lakes from the rest of the world, because it truly is, and allow it to go as it used to be and continue with that, because I believe that's what the residents truly, truly want. They don't want to see any more expense added to what they're doing. Board, it's up to you. I think it's time to sit and look at some of these things and say, if it ain't broke, let's not fix it. Any questions? Thank you, Jim.
That was great to see you.
Good to see you.
I used to shovel snow on his chairlift ramp, and you let me ski the hill for that.
Well, I thought you were paying.
Hi, my name is Cliff Busby. I live full-time in Serene Lakes. I own Castle Peak Snow Removal. When I started that business 12 years ago, I called the county. Everybody knows you got to have a business license, so I got a business license. I asked what else I needed to do to stay in business. They said that's all I needed. They didn't tell me that if I parked a commercial piece of equipment on a residential lot in Serene Lakes, I was going to be illegal and violating the code. Now, I'm not blaming the county. I don't expect every department to know what every other department's going on. I'm just explaining that I did the best I could when I started in business so that I wouldn't have any skeletons in the closet. I'd be up front, I'd be legal. If I can't do that, why be in business? Now I have about $400,000 worth of equipment. And 2 years ago, I was told that I was in violation of the county code. One of our competitors who lives in Nevada County turned all of us in who park equipment in Serene Lakes. So I'm a small business person, just like some of you have been or are currently. None of us want to come to the county and say, please, put more regulations on us. But you will never hear that in all the time that you're going to serve on this body, I'm sure. But what I don't want to do is be run out of business. If you enforce the existing code, I can't meet that code. Where I live, and I'm on one of the larger lots, I've only got 8,000 square feet. There's not one driver that drives for me, and I have 5 pieces of equipment that has 10,000 square feet. And that's what I would have to have with an MUP under the existing code, under the existing county code to stay in business. I've been to all the NITRAC and Squaw Valley MAC and the 2 planning commissions, and I went down and met with Lauren. I was pleasantly surprised when I drove down there and met with Lauren that he'd actually been to Serene Lakes in the wintertime. He actually understood the conditions that we had up there. We're not the same as every place else. Nobody, after Christmas time, nobody is going to be able to see these machines sitting in my driveway because the snow's already 12 feet deep. So it's not going to affect anybody. The Planning Commission spent hours of hearings, testimony. They heard all sides. They understood the conditions. They spent a certain amount of time on this. If you choose to not pass this ZTA that's in front of you, that means you're going to try to make the county enforce what's already existing, and that won't work. Nobody will be able to meet that code in Serene Lakes. So I think actually Norm referred to 42 letters. I think as of yesterday morning you'd actually received 55 letters from Serene Lakes. Some of them may have not made it to your packet because they got too late. But what these people want to do is just basically simply make sure their snow removal service that has been cleaning their driveway for a number of years can stay in business. Yes, if you pass this CTA, it's going to cost me some money. It's going to cost everybody else some money. But then you'll get, you won't have my competitor complaining that we're in violation. Any questions that I can answer for any of y'all?
I don't know if you can answer this, Cliff, but Norm had talked about, and Norm, maybe you want to come back up. Norm had talked about trying to carve out an exception for the summit because of the snow. Is that part of this proposal, or?
No, I think what Norm's referring to is something different. Norm is just saying basically leave it alone as it is. Don't enforce the existing code. And Norm can speak for himself, but don't enforce the existing code. I have no problem with that. I just don't think that's the direction you all are going in. So that's why I'm in favor of the ZTA as the Planning Commission has passed it. And here's a letter that didn't make it to your packet from the Homeowners Association.
And I'm sorry, can I follow up with a question on Lauren on that? Lauren, one of the things that was characterized about the situation to me early on was that many, if not most, of the existing operators, as Cliff's situation is, cannot comply with our existing code. They are operating illegally, in essence. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, when we evaluated the code enforcement activity, what we find in many cases, if not most cases, is that the current code, and it's really the 10,000 square feet, but occasionally the garage requirement is limiting such that the majority of them could not come into compliance.
Thank you.
Right there, just so you know, right now there's 17 pieces of equipment that get stored in Serene Lakes. There's about 850 houses out there. Norm has 8 pieces of equipment. I have 5. Carrie has 3, and Steve has 1. So there's 17 pieces of equipment. Every one of them are illegal based on the current ordinance. Anything else?
If we pass this ZTA amendment, that takes care of that?
They can come into compliance and be legal if we pass this, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mike Dunsford again. I admittedly am kind of new to this subject here this morning. I also am hard of hearing, but hopefully I'm going to make appropriate comments. And I have a very quick question. Is this change in ordinance applicable to eastern Placer County? And we're talking just Serene Lakes, we're talking Claw Valley, we're talking all neighborhoods.
Anything above 5,000 feet in Placer County.
Everything about 5,000 feet, okay. From a real estate perspective, this ordinance can greatly depreciate value of property. I had a personal experience in an adjacent neighborhood where I live, where there was a welding operation in a home. I dealt with Placer County, I dealt with code enforcement. I really was not satisfied with the result, but there was a lot of large equipment that came in and was serviced in the driveway and on the street. This was not an in-home occupation, the welding. This is not an in-home occupation, am I correct?
That's correct.
This really has an impact on your neighbor. It has an impact on your neighborhood. It is noise pollution. I understand it's a convenience for the operator, but it's introducing an industrial use into a residential neighborhood. I think it's wrong. It's very wrong. And not only does it depress real estate values immediate to the property, it's also potentially a contamination issue. Anytime you have large equipment, you have soil contamination. And that's introducing an issue to a residence that doesn't exist. Has that been addressed in your study and your consideration in this change? And what result, to that? And I don't expect you to answer that today, but my point is, it's inappropriate, it's not fair, it depreciates the value of the property where the storage occurs, and it greatly depreciates the value of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Probably address the issue about contamination, because you did look at that.
Well, there's two levels of review that occur. One is each one of these is only allowed through a discretionary review process. So in no case is a vehicle like this allowed as a matter of right. It has to go through an administrative review process, or it has to go through a minor use permit process. Through that process, the county has the ability to say no if it's inappropriate. The county also has the ability to impose conditions of approval. The standards, in addition to that discretion, the standards built within the code are intended to limit the potential for hazardous materials, fuel storage, and maintenance activities that could result in levels of contamination. The objective here is storage and then plowing, and then removal during the balance of the year when it's not in the snow season. So unlike other sort of industrial operations or industrial type operations that could involve a heavy piece of equipment, this is simply not allowed during the balance of the year beyond the snow season.
Well, I can tell you, it becomes a disclosure issue for somebody who has a piece of property who's had that kind of storage, potential contamination. It becomes a disclosure, and it's a very, very negative impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning. Good afternoon.
No, it's afternoon now.
I've been a homeowner in Alpine Meadows for 33 years. Recently, the planning department drafted a ZTA that was complete. I thought it was well researched. It was reasonable to all parties. Even allowed for the significant difference in snowfall between Donner Summit and the Tahoe areas. It considered inputs from homeowners and snowplow operators over a nearly 2-year period of time. There were 8 community meetings. 15 previous ZTAs were evaluated. That ZTA was reviewed and accepted by the majority of the snowplow operators and the homeowners and the Squaw Valley Bank. However, here comes a however. The Planning Commission, prodded by one of the commissioners, revised that ZTA to delete the maximum horsepower and increase the allowable size of equipment to be stored on residential property. During that meeting, not one commissioner mentioned a concern that this impact would have to neighbors. Subsequent to that meeting, the Planning Commission changes were unanimously rejected by the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council. one of the persistent and major objections that I've heard from homeowners in Alpine Meadows, Squaw Valley, and the West Shore is the size of equipment stored and operated by snowplow operators. That objection has also been documented in recent letters and emails that you've received from many homeowners. It's obvious that the bigger the equipment, the more noise, vibration, diesel smoke, and longer warm-up times they're going to be. I also strongly disagree with the staff's opinion that these changes did not result in a substantial increase in the previously identified impacts in the mitigated negative declaration. There's a significant pollution and health concern associated with larger equipment, especially when it's allowed to be stored and operated within 20 feet of a neighbor's residence. There is no requirement that this equipment, 8 feet or less, be stored in a garage. It has to be visual screening, but it can be within 20 feet of a neighbor's residence, outside. It would not be appropriate to adopt a ZTA that invites industrial-type equipment to be stored in residential areas. I believe that the 2-year wisdom of the Planning Department, the NITRAC, and the Squaw Valley MAC should trump the 11th hour desire of one member of the Planning Commission. I urge the board to accept the changes to this ZTA that were recommended at the June 11th NITRAC meeting and reinstate the original horsepower and size limitations. Thank you.
My name is Wade Friedel, and I'm from 4171 Donner Drive in Serene Lakes. I've been a homeowner and resident there for 40 years. And the rumor that's been going around that I'm the last surviving member of the Donner Party is not true. It's close, but not true.
I thought it was Norm.
Anyway, I'm also on the Water Board, which is the only municipal agency up there. And I just want to re-emphasize the fact that unless the snow is removed up there after a storm, nothing moves, because the snow is very heavy. It comes down very quickly, and the driveway clearance operators are absolutely essential to the process of a viable community up there. And one of the speakers said that the equipment could jeopardize the peace and quiet of the neighbors. Well, there won't be any jeopardy of the peace and quiet of the neighbors up there if we don't have this, because there won't be anyone up there. Some years ago, we did not have off-street parking. We only could park on street. And we converted to off-street parking, which has been a plus all the way around, but the only way we were able to convert to off-street parking was with the snow removal contractors. And I can't emphasize strongly enough that we need to maintain the ability of the Serene Lake snow removal contractors to pursue their craft. Thank you.
I have one question for you, sir. Being you've been there for 40 years, didn't Serene Lakes used to be called Ice Lakes?
Well, the lakes themselves were originally called ice lakes, and on the map they are still ice lakes. Okay. Serene Lakes was the subdivision name that was given by the developer.
It sounded better.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Klaus with Klaus Excavation. We plow over on the West Shore, and I've talked to Lauren. I'm concerned with your 7 and 8 foot height requirement that you come up with. We do a lot of county roads that we plow that are unmaintained roads by the county. So we plow those, and you can't plow it with a machine that's 7 or 8 feet tall. I mean, that's 2 feet taller than me, and it's, we use, loaders, front-end loaders, and I keep one on my house, for instance, and I plow all those roads, out from my house. So essentially, if we couldn't keep it at, a loader at my house, that's going to shut us down. So I was hoping that height requirement could be raised up. It's not very high. So that's it.
Ron Colby, Serene Laker. Hi, Jennifer. I'm not going to rehash any of the things that have been said before about how this may or may not affect Serene Lakes. It's well documented that Serene Lakes is a little bit different place than the other locations in and around the lake and over in the Squaw and Alpine Meadows areas. But I love the sound of motors running in the morning on a snow event, because that means the whole world is opened up to me, which includes some of the best recreational opportunities in the entire state, if not the nation. Without this, or any jeopardization of the services that we do now have, whether it be cost or driving other operators out of business, I feel it's going to be a great detriment to what we have. A few things that I did notice, there was a 20-foot possibility setback of these machines from a structure that was noted in the document. Lauren, is there something still in there on that?
Yeah, for the board's benefit, on pages 32, 33, with footnotes on page 34, is the matrix of standards. And one of the requirements is a setback standard or an off-street parking standard. The outdoor storage setback standard is primarily associated with the storage of accessory equipment. In the majority of cases, the vehicle would actually be parked within the garage on the smaller parcels.
And if it could not be set in a garage and set outside, would it meet that? Would it have to come under that 20 foot? Because I'm not sure there's a spot 20 feet away from any of these homes for storage that would even qualify.
Yeah, what you have in the Serene Lakes area, which is on the bottom of page 33, is the Serene Lakes area, which we actually identified by section township range rather than by neighborhood, has a different set of standards. One, there's not a garage enclosure requirement because there are very few garages within that area. Two, the parcel size is lower. So the standard is relaxed in Serene Lakes. However, it does state it is defined by the minor use permit, but not less than 20 feet from any adjacent residential structure. So the setback isn't from property line. It's that you have to be 20 feet away from your neighbor's home.
With a few of those things in mind, I think that what is set up right now with Serene Lakes is a workable solution. I do not necessarily like to be in violation. I don't want any of my neighboring snowplow operators to be in that. However, we do want to make sure and maintain a process that works, that gets us out. My proposal here is not to discount the community or the county's effort, but to say no to this proposal as it stands. If you do have to make approval of this proposal, please consider excluding Serene Lakes, and that you use another process to get a process that works for Serene Lakes together, and there are agencies up in Serene Lakes available for that purpose. And also remember, it would have to be a cross-county activity on that too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Todd Brownell, Alpine Meadows. I have a snow removal business over there. I started my business and I had to build my garage a little bit bigger so I could fit one of the small tractors in there. I had my engineer redesign it and put a steel beam in so I could fit something that was more closer to over 8 feet or 7 feet, between 7 and 8 feet. After running my business, I noticed that the hardest part of my business was the snow that was actually left from the grader, which most of it is still out in the street because the banks are so pushed out into the street so far that these little tractors really had a hard time getting around the valley doing all these berms out in the street and trying to get to everybody. So I purchased a bigger tractor. That bigger tractor does not fit in my garage. It's a little over 10 feet tall. It's state-of-the-art equipment. It's made by New Holland. It's very fuel efficient and puts out less emissions as far as diesel. It is a lot quieter than my smaller tractors because I can run it at a lower RPM. But it does the big work out in the streets, removing these big ice berms. And like I say, most of my plowing is in the streets, not necessarily in the driveways. And it's real slow going, and now I have this big tractor, and I don't believe I can continue my snow removal business with these smaller tractors unless I were to purchase more of them. But my preferred piece of equipment is my bigger piece of equipment. It does the job, gets the job done almost twice as fast as the little ones, and I hope you can work with me. Thank you.
Pauline McDowell, Alpine Meadows. What the Planning Commission lost sight of in changing the size and horsepower of snow removal equipment is that it is first and foremost a residential neighborhood. It was zoned, lots were bought, homes were built, and are presently enjoyed as residential. The ZTA, as published before the Planning Commission change, had reasonable protections for the homeowner to minimize the impact of the proposed zoning change. At a meeting in May, one woman stated that she sleeps with her windows cracked open, and if this was happening 20 feet from her home, she'd move. What she didn't realize that she would have to move below 5,000 feet or to a different county to keep the protection that she enjoys today. A different gentleman, who is also hearing impaired, said that he didn't hear the plows, but when they start up at 3 in the morning, they rattle his home and they wake him up. Horsepower and size definitely make a difference. Some people have said that they feel good hearing a plow outside their window because they know they will get off to work or to ski in the morning. There is a big difference between a 5-minute driveway clearing and a 40 to 90-minute warm-up time. One commissioner even stated that he has a diesel pickup and it makes lots of noise. He didn't say that he started it in the wee hours of the morning and let it run for 40-plus minutes. We have heard lots and lots of uninformed analogies. One of the operators from Serene Lake stated that his little putt-putt blowers do a fine job. If that works in Serene Lakes, it can work anywhere because of the difference between snow accumulation between there and the east slope. Besides, the ZTA has provisions in place to address heavy snow events in the Tahoe Basin. In any successful negotiations, compromise is key. Doesn't the word compromise mean give and take? So far, the homeowners have done all of the giving, and the snowplow operators have done all of the taking. I don't call that a compromise. The Planning Commission tightened the requirements for parcels over a half an acre, but added size and unlimited horsepower when a neighbor can be only 20 feet away. That didn't make sense to me. It's time to get large, obtrusive snow removal equipment out of our neighborhoods. Stay with the smaller, neighbor-friendly putt-putt that fit in the garage, are easier to screen, they minimize the impact to neighbors. Please return the ZTA to the way it was written by the Planning Department, and it was approved by 2 local councils. Thank you.
I'm going to close the hearing and bring it back to the board. Jennifer, do you want to?
I'll start, and I'll once again thank my predecessor. Actually, I really want to thank Lauren Clark because this was put in his lap, and I'm not sure he wanted it there, and whatever happens today, I owe him a cocktail or two. I believe we've been through 18 different iterations of this now. The public comment and the public input on this has been fantastic, and I say that in the best possible way. Dozens of people have shown up at meetings. They've made their voices heard. I've gotten phone calls, letters, faxes. I think the only thing I haven't got is a DVD. And I'm a Donner Summit resident. I'm one of those people who's really happy to hear the snowplow in the morning because it does mean I can get out of my driveway. But I sympathize with, you know, those homeowners who have large and or multiple pieces of equipment living next to them. It's not a scenario I'd like to live in. I'm fortunate that we do have the putt-putts, as Norm calls them, on Donner Summit. They do a phenomenal job. I have to say, back in the day, we had a loader in our driveway, and it didn't do anywhere near the job that the putt-putts do. I'm a big fan of the small blowers as they are on Donner Summit. This really is a balancing act. We need to make sure that we can allow these businesses to become legal and operate legally. Right now, they aren't and they don't, and many of them could be put out of business at a moment's notice, meaning none of us would have snow removal service. That's not okay with me. I want to get out of my driveway. I want to pay my snow removal company their fair costs, including an additional cost one time for my share of a minor use permit, if that's necessary. It's not going to bankrupt them. It's not going to bankrupt me to pay an extra $40 or $50 1 year. I do have some concerns with the zoning text as it's written. I've discussed them with Lauren. One is the question about moving pieces of equipment from property to property, how we track that, how it's paid for. I don't want to bankrupt the snow removal companies. I don't want to bankrupt the individuals whose driveways are being cleared. I'm concerned that the Planning Commission went to an unlimited number of pieces. I don't think that's appropriate. I think we should pick a number. I think 5 is a good number, and I'm not picking it because that's what Cliff's got. It was just a number I came up with. I think today was the first time I heard that he has 5 pieces. I think if we're looking at, 5 pieces for a $1,865 minor use permit, I think that's a reasonable fee for folks to pay. My concerns about the size and the horsepower, I actually already took up with Lauren earlier in some of these specific sort of more technical questions about the implementation of the ZTA. These pieces are still going to need to either go in garages or be screened. So I for one, am not terribly concerned about the size and horsepower piece, except for the height. I think the height matters because you got to be able to get something in a garage. I know the putt-putts fit in the garage because my husband used to do repair and maintenance work on one of our local operators' pieces of equipment, and it went in our garage. So it can be done. Mr. Brownell, I think you said your smaller piece fits in your garage. Is that correct? Yeah. So it can be done. No one's going to be happy here. The snow removal operators aren't going to be entirely happy because they're going to have to pay more, and it's going to be more inconvenient, and they're going to have to figure out how to make this work. The upside for you guys is that it's going to work. You're going to be legal, and you don't have the fear hanging over your head of some neighbor making a code enforcement complaint and Placer County coming in and quite legally putting you out of business. That is truly the situation as it stands today. Some of the individual homeowners aren't going to be happy because they're still going to have pieces of equipment running around their neighborhoods and parked in their neighborhoods. I feel like I'm trying to cut the baby in half here, but I think this is the best solution that can be reached, and it's been reached with input from neighbors, input from snow removal operators, input from me, I mean, I've lived 20 years on Donner Summit. I know the challenges and I know the value, and I know snow removal is not optional. But we've got to bring folks into compliance. We have to give them the opportunity to make their businesses legal, and we have to address the homeowners' concerns about huge and multiple pieces. We don't want more bad code enforcement situations like we have seen around this issue. I think, while clearly not perfect, this is a resolution we can all live with, and I would ask my fellow board members to support this.
Exactly. What do you, which one, the recommendation is in the staff report?
Yeah, I would ask that we adopt the mitigated neg deck, amend Chapter 17 to add Section 17.56235, amend the related sections 17.04.030, 17.06.050 of Chapter 17, and we amend the Squaw Valley General Plan and Land Use Ordinance to add Section 47 and to amend Sections 220.10, 224.10, and 226.10.
Motion would also include that to the extent the Planning Commission allowed for unlimited number of pieces of equipment under a master permit, that the indication from your comments would you would limit that, modify that language to be 5.
That's correct.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? I don't think I need a roll call on this, do I? No. All those in? Okay.
These two gentlemen here just spoke to us. They have some equipment that's higher than 8 feet. They've been in the business. They look like they know what they're doing. They've got a major investment in their equipment to do the job, but aren't we forcing them to get rid of that equipment or park it? Or I don't understand what we're going to do to help these people.
Lauren, do you want to address that?
The current provision would be that if there's a second piece of equipment, for example, and it exceeded this height maximum, that second piece of equipment would have to be located at a commercial or industrial location and then essentially brought onto the streets and plowing the streets and then taken back to that location. It couldn't be stored at the residential area. There is a provision, which is standard number 11, which states when there is a local, state, or federally declared emergency or the National Weather Service declares that there is a winter storm warning or emergency in effect, one vehicle more than the maximum allowed may be stored on a driveway during that storm event. If there's room for compromise, it may be that that vehicle, which is only brought in for 24, 72 hours, I gotta believe maximum, might be able to exceed that 8-foot height maximum. So in other words, it's only there during the storm event, and then it has to go away.
And tell me who determines that it's a major storm event?
Yeah, we used definitions and criteria that are embedded in the proposed code from the National Weather Service.
So if the National Weather Service says that it's a major event, then these gentlemen can bring their equipment in and store it?
Yeah, that standard number 11 is silent as to the question of size. It simply doesn't state what a size standard is for that piece that's being brought in. The idea is that you would stage it in advance of the storm, you'd use it during the storm, and then you take it back to a commercial industrial location after the storm.
So if they know that there's a major storm event coming, they can bring their equipment in?
That's correct.
And so the only cost to them would be finding the storage space, I imagine, that would be off-site. Would that storage space have to be inside, or could they have it stored in?
If it's at a commercial or industrial location, in many cases, it's not even subject to our regulation. The other alternative is if you have 10,000 square feet and a garage, there is the other section of code. So if you do have those circumstances, you can apply for any size vehicle through a use permit year-round, but you have to have that 10,000 square feet and a garage.
So they'll still be able, it sounds like they'll still be able to use the equipment, just to be more inconvenient and an additional cost if I
This bigger piece won't be able to be stored on site.
unless there's a major storm event in the middle of that event. Oh, it's best I can do, I'm sorry.
Any other comment? Okay, the motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You know, this, we just passed this, but this is one of those cases where maybe government were our own worst enemy, in the fact that when you have to remove snow, you have to remove snow. And you need this equipment to do it. We're going to be limited in the county, maybe what we're going to be able to do this winter. We're going to need these folks around to maybe help us out, hire them or whatever. So we'll see how this goes, and maybe we have to look at it again. I mean, I understand what they're saying in the residential area, but quite frankly, the Sierra Cement Falls, you need to get it out of there. All right, thank you. We just got Paul Ennis. So, we got Richard is up. Doc Burton. Norma, it was great to see you. Let me give you my card. I can remember skiing with you. Remember Billy Campbell? Yes. My dad used to. All right, we'll take up item number 7, Children's System of Care.
Good morning, Board and Chairman. Dr. Richard Burton, Director of Health and Human Services and Health Officer. Richard Connect will bring a couple items on our Children's System of Care services in the Tahoe area. I wanted to emphasize as part of this presentation that actually on an annual basis we serve over 11,000 residents and family members up here in the Tahoe area. And the types of services that we provide, we're the only people in the area that provide these services. Sometimes we do them in conjunction of the nonprofit communities and private contractors. But the services that we provide include medical and dental services that are not otherwise available. They include nutritional assistance for families that are working but having a tough time making ends meet, and it provides temporary assistance for families that are unemployed, helping them find jobs and keeping a roof over their head. So annually we serve 11,000 residents and families, and what Richard will present is just a subset of that. Thank you.
Briefly to introduce this, I would draw your attention to the extraordinary outcomes that we enjoy here in Tahoe with our community partnerships, particularly the Tahoe Truckee Community Collaborative and its member organizations, which form a unique and valuable tapestry of safety and welfare services for our young people. Last year, just by way of example and for your awareness, more than 60 children received 3,000 hours of mental health services, preventing costly and traumatic out-of-home care. More than 25 children were kept safe through the Child Welfare Services teams, and more than 250 families were impacted directly by the collaborative, preventing the cost and associated need for direct county involvement. I would share one quick story with you. A young gentleman named Miguel was recently served through our Community Services Division, where county staff and partners engaged with him and his family in services. He had a long history of drinking, had overdosed on a number of occasions, and violated the terms and conditions of his probation in a number of ways. He advocated for himself early on that he didn't want anything to do with county services or social services, and he wished that we would leave him alone. His father had died when he was very young. He'd spent many years depressed and isolated, but last spring, after a recent relapse event, he determined that he thought it best to engage with his service team, and through the collaborative made extraordinary progress, was able to complete drug court, complete the terms of his probationary agreements, and is currently studiously preparing to take his GED. He took the additional step of initiating his own self-help support group with the peers in his community, and he's currently, again, making great progress in the program, courtesy of the collaborative here in the Tahoe Basin. So with that context, I would present to you item 7A this afternoon. With your support in recent years, the System of Care has sought federal dollars to increase engagement and improve services to Placer's Native children and families. The Native community has responded to this effort, and a host of community events and other efforts have led to improving relations and better engagement. A group of community leaders, including education, probation, health and human services, and nonprofit partners, would like to build on these successes by providing state dollars in this contract before you this afternoon for culturally specific counseling, addiction recovery, and other therapies to Native peoples, many of whom reside here in the Tahoe Basin. These services reduce dependency on county-funded services and provide a more readily accessible method of service delivery in a culturally sensitive manner. These categorical state and federal dollars total $344,000, and no county general funds are required. This item does require a small budget revision in the amount of $247,627. I'd be happy to take any questions on this item.
Any questions? Any comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion. Second. Roll call.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes. Item B.
Reach out to Native consumers. A multi-year strategy of using experienced parent consumers to engage all parents and family members in our system has yielded some excellent outcomes. The support, mentoring, and advocacy services delivered under this contract 7B improve engagement, reduce dropout rates, and shorten court proceedings for some 500 families in the county. This contract totals $951,951 in state and federal costs and represents a slight decrease from prior year expenditures. Again, no county general funds are used, and we recommend your approval.
Any questions? Anyone in the audience? Bring back to the board.
Move approval of item 7B.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. There's some interesting numbers there. That'd be a lot of coincidence there.
We didn't plan it.
All right, now we will adjourn as the Placer County Board of Supervisors and convene as the Placer County Redevelopment Agency. Take up item number 8. Mr. LeBou.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Jim LeBou, Redevelopment Agency. The item before you today is to consider authorizing the acquisition of real property in Kings Beach, which fronts on the south side of Highway 28, a little east of Fox Street. And also to make findings, redevelopment required findings for that purchase, and authorize the redevelopment director to execute purchase and sale agreement to make that transaction be able to occur, and add the property to the redevelopment agency's master fixed asset list. The map before you shows other properties and activities that the redevelopment agency are engaged in. You can see that the property is near to our Eastern Gateway property, where we have been over the last couple of years acquiring property, as well as the Swiss Mart property across the 28, and the Kings Beach Housing Now housing project that we are working on as well. So the proposed purchase is property that has been made available to us, and it has been offered to us in line with a current appraisal, and we see it as an opportunity to further support our redevelopment activities in conjunction with the disposition of the Eastern Gateway and the Swiss Mart property. We see this as another opportunity to make the property available for redevelopment activities, and we anticipate we would issue requests for proposals for development proposals in the coming year, and we don't know yet exactly what would occur on this property, but we will get those proposals, and we can package these properties together, and it will help with the overall revitalization of the community.
You bet.
So, looking at this staff report, I noticed that it claims consistency with the Environmental Guidelines Section 15060C. I also think it should be noted for the record that the Redevelopment Agency has a pre-existing adopted EIR, and so I just want to read something into the record, and I've obviously worked this out with Mr. LeBou. So this purchase is consistent with the previously approved program of the Redevelopment Agency, its periodic updates, the policies and directions of the agency board, and the previously adopted environmental impact report that was approved for the Redevelopment Agency formation, policies, and activities. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you. I just wanted to show these are photos of the existing site. As you can see, it is vacant, so it provides a good opportunity to add in some development.
I interrupted your photo.
No, that's a nice location.
Is that commercial, Jim?
Yes, property is zone commercial.
So we could store some snow removal equipment there?
Sky's the limit.
Any other questions? Anyone in the audience wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Move to approve item 8 on our board agenda, redevelopment agency purchase of parcels.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Now we will adjourn as the Placer County Redevelopment Agency and reconvene as the Placer County Board of Supervisors and take up item 9 on the Tiburon system. Obviously, I don't see Sheriff Bonner, so.
Hey.
You didn't know you were going to have to speak, did you?
Lieutenant and I were back there talking, who's going to go up? Because I had no idea this was coming up. Usually Barbara Vasana's up here. I'm Don Hutchinson, the captain of support services with the Sheriff's Department. And basically we're asking the board to approve an amended maintenance agreement between the Placer County Sheriff's, Corner Marshal, Placer County Sheriff's Office, and Tiburon Incorporated, and authorize the purchasing agent to execute any related documents. The maintenance begins July 1st, 2009 and ends June 30th, 2010 at an annual cost of $310,334, a reduction of $173,362 from previous fiscal year, resulting in an estimated savings of $87,300. There is no impact to the general fund, and this has actually been done through the reduction's been accomplished through a contract with Abtech for database maintenance, so we just kind of substituted one service for another, but at a greatly reduced cost. So, again, no, there is no impact to the general fund.
Anybody in the audience have any comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? You did an outstanding job.
The board will now go into closed session to take up item 10, discussion of the Kings Beach Business and Citizens Alliance case, and then labor discussions will report out later.